a shot, remedies to find. Tipping it off and then see. So she gave him eggs and her bones and eggs and sucked them all. And before he had the last one sucked, he couldn't see her at all. Oh, it me right, Finnegan Mary, oh, it didn't go on. Me right, Finnegan Mary, oh, tipping it off and then see. She led him to the river, she led him to the brine. But sighing of a Martin, 'twas him that shot her in. Oh, it me right, Finnegan Mary, oh, it didn't go on. Me right, Finnegan Mary, oh, tipping it off and then see. He swam to the river, she swam to the brine, crying, Martin, oh, Martin, don't leave me behind. Ah, shut up, sissy, a silly old fool, can't you see Martin's blind? Me right, Finnegan Mary, oh, tipping it off and then see. There's 9 in me family, and none of them is me own. I wish in every man would come and claim his own. Oh, it me right, Finnegan Mary, oh, tipping go on. Me right, Finnegan Mary, oh, tipping it off and then saw it. Me right, Finnegan Mary, oh, tipping go on. Me right, Finnegan Mary, oh, tipping it off to Kilbegan. Oh, it me right, Finnegan Mary, oh, tipping go on. Me right, Finnegan Mary, oh, tipping it up to Kilbegan whiskey.
Paddy Homan, Cork man from Fairhill, thank you so much for that introduction. Paddy's going to be joining us for the rest of the night, our resident musician on his bowron. So Paddy, thanks for kicking that off. Maybe the most impressive intro we've ever had to the Lock-in. Fair play to you. Paddy, we're going to come back to you later on, so thanks a million.
Right.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Lock-in live stream. It's Friday, and you know what that means? It means we made it through another week. Tonight is a fantastic night ahead of us. We have a session. As you just saw, Paddy Homan, our musician from Cork, living in Chicago, but from Fairhill and Cork, kicked us off with Finnegan's Wake, and we've got some great music, some great stories, some great sips tonight. So I want to know where you are. I want to know what you're drinking. I want to know what's in your glass. We are going to be diving into the stories, the history of Kilbegan, Ireland's oldest licensed distillery tonight, and we're going to have a great time doing it. I'm really excited about the show we have planned for us tonight. So great to see so many of you turning up with Kilbegan in your glass already. Larkin, fair play to you, with Kilbegan Pot Still, one of the whiskies we'll be drinking tonight. Andrew says the crack has already moved to deadly. It has indeed. We're starting off high, and we're going to try and go even higher. The bar has been set very high with a kickoff like that from Paddy. Cassandra, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Ed says we're raising the bar. We are indeed. We're bringing in the experts. John loves the intro. Great intro there from Paddy. And we're going to hear a lot more from Paddy over the course of the night. So tonight is a Kilbegan session. Every session has music. Every session has drink. Every session has stories, and that's what we've got for you here tonight. And really excited to bring on in a minute or two Michael Egan, National Brand Ambassador for Kilbegan, who's got some great stories and is going to lead us on a tasting of the 3 whiskies we're going to taste tonight. We'll be tasting a Kilbegan traditional blend. We'll be tasting the Kilbegan small batch rye, and we'll be drinking the most recent release, the Kilbegan single pot still. Really excited to try these whiskies and to share them with you and to share their stories. So Johnny's on Jameson, 12-year-old up in Long Beach. Drake is joining us from Youngstown, Ohio. John is pouring a Kilbegan single grain. Fantastic. Dara is starting with a traditional blend and working his way through the range. Fantastic. Mark in Daytona Beach with some wonderful Kilbegan single grain. So great to see so many of you with Kilbegan in your glass, and great to see so many of you sharing pictures earlier today of the Kilbegans that you're going to pour. Some very old Kilbegans I see in some people's glasses. We'll talk a little bit about some of those older vintages that some of you managed to secure as well. Paul is yet to try a drop of Kilbegan, so this will be interesting. Well, that's the goal tonight, is to share with you the stories, the history, the connection, the sips, the nose, the palate of these three wonderful whiskies that come from a remarkable distillery, a distillery that we could talk for 3 years about. Such are the number of stories about such a legendary distillery in Ireland. So really excited to share those with you. So in a minute, I'm going to bring on Michael Egan, our National Brand Ambassador, but let's set the stage before we bring Michael on and share with you exactly what Kilbegan is all about.
Our town may not look like much. We don't have a traffic light, much less a skyline. Just one giant brick reminder of who we are. We are home to a distillery that's the oldest of its kind. For 200 years, it made a whiskey beloved the world over, until hard times crept in and bolted its doors. But this is a place with a smokestack for a backbone, and people who believe that as long as the river's running, there's work to be done. As a town, we kept paying the distillery fee to keep hope alive, until we could once more fill its stills. Because we would never let that tower be reduced to a monument. We are Kilbegan, a town and a whiskey both. And every bottle is proof our spirit never left.
Michael, that's the kick over the table video of emotion and the Oscar for most emotive whiskey video ever, isn't it?
Hairs on the back of your neck standing up, Barry. How are you?
I'm great. How are you? You're very welcome.
Brilliant, thank you. And thanks for having us on here. And thanks to Paddy for such an amazing intro and joining us for the evening. I'm excited and I've been looking forward to this all week now.
There's nothing like a good session at the end of a week, and whether we can physically make it to a pub or we do it here on Stories and Sips every Friday night. Well, the important thing is that we have a session.
Exactly. I'm buzzing, as you say. We're March 13th. Friday the 13th was one of the last good sessions I had in a pub. And we've been quarantined now, myself and my fiance. So I've been looking forward to sharing a drink with many, many more people than just Kristen and I in the house here.
Of course, the ideal scenario tonight, Michael, would have been if we had 3 Cork men on, but unfortunately there's only 2 Cork men and yourself. Where are you from?
We'll have to settle. I'm a Dub, proud Dub. From Raheny in Dublin, just outside the city. But Paddy, very, very proud Cork man, and I often go down to the Galway Arms and listen to him in Chicago on a Sunday night. So great man, and great to have him on.
Looking forward to more tunes from Paddy over the course of the night. So tonight is a deep dive into Kilbegan. It's a distillery and a whiskey brand that is legendary for many reasons in Ireland. I first came across it as a young gossour, a young fella in Ireland, and the story of Kilbegan is a remarkable story, and you're going to share some of that with us over the course of the night. But before we dive into the history of Kilbegan, what Kilbegan and the distillery is all about, we have some logistics to share with everybody. So we're joined around the country tonight by Kilbegan ambassadors who are living digitally in the comments. Is that right?
They are. Yeah, we have 6 ambassadors. So I'm fortunate to be on a team of myself, 7 ambassadors across the United States. We had 12 pre-pandemic, but obviously different constraints in different markets. So a bunch of our ambassadors chose to head home, which is a decision we completely support as a team. So we currently have 6 across the United States. So if you guys are on here in the chat box, feel free to shout out and say hi. I already saw Dara has joined us and is making his way through the portfolio. But we have ambassadors joining us from Texas, Minnesota, upstate New York, DC, Massachusetts, and New Jersey.
So if anybody's got any questions over the course of the night about Kilbegan, if you've got questions about the whiskies, the story, anything at all, type them in the comments. Michael or myself will get to them. The ambassadors will get to them. We wanted to bring everybody on because we wanted to make sure we get to every single comment, and we wanted to engage the ambassadors around the country in a bit of a chat as well. So feel free to put any questions over the course of the night. As I always say, with whiskey tastings and with whiskey events, there are no stupid questions, and we're only here to share what we know. And if we don't have the answers, somebody else might, and we might be able to point you in the right direction. So stick your questions in there. So that's great to see. Welcome all the ambassadors. You faceless ambassadors around the country. I look forward to seeing you in the comments as you answer the questions. In addition to the 3 whiskies that we're going to taste tonight, in addition to Paddy, who is a great addition, and let's be honest, he's going to outshine the 2 of us, Michael, because any man with an Irish drum with a bowron is going to do better than the 2 of us chancers. But in addition to that, we do have some surprises. So over the course of the night tonight, for those of you who want to stay tuned, there will be some surprises, some surprise and delight moments. So I have some things here that magically landed on my doorstep, like wonderful Kilbegan t-shirts. Paddy was wearing one of these earlier. Kilbegan t-shirts. I have hats. I have glasses. I have all kinds of things here from Kilbegan. And all I can say is that over the course of the night, there may be some surprises where some of these might end up in your hands. Like, what would you do for a pair of Kilbegan socks? You haven't been living without a pair of Kilbegan socks. But there are a number of ways over the course of the night that we may be able to surprise you. No guarantees, but just saying, if you happen to take a photo of the lock-in on your computer, your phone, your tablet, and share it to the Irish Whiskey Fans of America Facebook group, or answer one of our trivia questions tonight, or share a favorite Irish toast in the comments, you may get a surprise. You may get a surprise during the week. You may be contacted about some of these wonderful Kilbegan items that we have here. So those are things that will happen throughout the night. Tonight's all about having the crack and having a few whiskies. What should we start with, Michael? Should we start with a little bit of the story of what Kilbegan Distillery is all about, and maybe perhaps some of its history?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head there, Barry, when you said we could actually talk about this distillery for 3 years. It's such an amazing place. And for those of your guests listening in who haven't been there, please get in touch with myself or any of the 6 ambassadors on the line, because we'd welcome the chance to set you up with a nice tour. As I say, we can't pay for your flights, but we will certainly get you set up with a beautiful tour of the distillery. Kilbegan Distillery is located right on the banks of the River Brosna in the town of Kilbegan in County Westmeath. So it's about an hour directly west of Dublin, right in the heart of Ireland, or in about an hour west of Dublin, right between Dublin and Galway, I should say. So right in the heart of Ireland. It is actually the oldest continuously licensed distillery in the world. Now, I say that knowing that you had a recent conversation, Barry, with Jack Ferris of Bushmills, and who's a good friend of mine, and we can unequivocally say that Kilbegan is, we're proud to say, the oldest continuously licensed. Now, some of our friends and competitors received a license to distill centuries ago as well, but I don't think there's another distillery on the island of Ireland, or around the world for that matter, that has maintained and renewed its license every single year for 263 plus years. So
should we bring Jack in here to compete? I've got him here on standby. You didn't know this, but he's actually in the wings waiting.
Phone a friend. Yeah, so we've maintained our license for 263 years now, and that's something we're extremely proud of. And as ambassadors and custodians of the brand, it's our responsibility and legacy to carry that forward and bring that on to hopefully what is another 200 plus years of distilling legacies around Kilbegan. We house today and still operate, Barry, the oldest operating pot still in the world. So our small copper pot still in Kilbegan is over 185 years old, and is responsible for 2 of the whiskies that we're going to try today, our Kilbegan small batch rye and our Kilbegan single pot still. So it really is a historic place. There's very few places that I've been to around the world that you walk into a building and every corner you turn around, or every wall you look at, there's a story behind it and there's history there. And to your point, we could be weeks talking about every story, but back from 1757 we had the McManus family. So it's been through various families throughout the centuries, but the McManus family, then into the Cod family, and then owned and operated through the back half of the golden era of the Irish whiskey industry, the back half of the 1800s, straight into Prohibition then, and on to up until the 1950s. It was run by the Locks family, which I'm sure we'll touch on. I was actually going to text you earlier on to see if we could change the name to the John Lock-in instead of the Lock-in.
John Lock-in. And was it the Locks family that built the tall stack, the chimney stack in the distillery, or was that a different
there before,
era?
Yeah, and a lot of your old images have that as well. The Locks family were certainly responsible for more so Mary Locke. John Locke passed away in the mid 1800s, and his wife took over, and then his two sons. But and they built the distillery to the point where it was producing around 200,000 gallons a year, or just under, which is pretty impressive. And that was toward the end of the 1800s, when, as I said, Irish whiskey was experiencing some of its finest days. I
remember when I was young, God, I must have been very young, I remember hearing about this renovation project through, I think it was an RTE news clip of the locals in Kilbegan had decided that they wanted to restore this building that they were fierce proud of in the town. What year was it that they decided that needed to be done? So
basically that kicked off around the 1980s or early 1980s. John Teeling, Willie MacArthur, and I'm sure a lot of your guests know this story, but opened Cooley Distillery in 87 and Kilbegan Distillery in 89. But prior to that, toward the end of the 1970s, early 1980s, the Kilbegan Restoration Committee got together. And I've seen that little documentary on RTE, and it's fascinating.
Yeah, it's on the RTE player, I think, or on the RTE archives. Yeah,
it's fascinating to see some of the stories here. See some of the photos that you have up now. The committee there restoring the old water wheel, which is up and running today. Working on the old steam engine, which is one of the only fully functional steam engines in operation around the island of Ireland today. In fact, there's probably not even 5 fully functional steam engines, none as old as Kilbegan's. And when I first came on board with Kilbegan in 2012, one of the first men I met at the distillery was Brian Quinn. And he was one of the men responsible for spearheading this committee. And he's interviewed a couple of times throughout that short documentary. So it's just amazing. And the whole legacy, even through, as I've mentioned, the Locks era, the boiler blowing up, which we can touch on as we talk about the blended whiskey as well. But the boiler blowing up and almost bringing the distillery to its knees, but the community came together and actually pooled money and bought John Locke a new boiler, which I have a snippet from a newspaper actually that I'd love to read you later on. And then the distillery shutting down after the which I know you've covered, the golden, or the watch, one of the Swiss watch saga.
Scandal in the 1950s or 60s,
amazing.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, unbelievable. And so the distillery shut down not long after that, and the community again pooled their own money together and kept the legacy alive up until 1989 when it was reopened. So the whole that Kilbegan Restoration Committee is just one example of the community of Kilbegan continuously getting together to make sure that this distillery stays in somewhat operational form.
Long before I'd ever tasted Kilbegan, I was in love with this almost Hollywood-like story of this small town in the Midlands. And it's actually a shock and a surprise that a Hollywood movie hasn't been made about it, because there's been movies made about a lot less this town. And I can just picture a few lads in a pub one night saying, we should do something about that distillery, and coming together. And then the wives and the husbands and the kids. And before you know it, there's shovels being dragged out of sheds, and they're digging earth and they're fixing the water wheel. And it's a remarkable story. But this idea that, or the fact that they continuously paid for the license on the distillery every year as a town so that it wouldn't lose its status as a distillery is such a romantic story, isn't it?
And how fortunate are we as ambassadors to be building that legacy now and continuing it on? Because if it wasn't for, and we weren't making whiskey at this stage, you know, they were restoring it and hoping to turn it into some sort of visitor center. But it was purely because of, and I'm sure there was a myriad of other reasons as well, but it was purely because of the love and the attachment that they had to the distillery. It was their parents, grandparents, great-grandparents that would have been working in that distillery. And you've been to the town, so you know how small it is. And if something that historical in such a small town was to be no more, they probably felt it was a poor reflection on the village out of town itself. It's
lovely in the video where there's that typical Irish self-deprecating, Well, there isn't much to talk about in the town. There's not much here, but we've a lovely distillery over here.
How Irish is that?
It really is.
You know what? You know what's great about the video, though, which I always point out. There's a part about 3/4 of the way through, and it has two old men, two twins actually, and I believe it's up on YouTube if anybody watching wants to see it. But it was their father that actually stopped the water wheel when it shut down in the 50s. And they were the two responsible for kicking it back off once we got to the point where it was able to run again.
Stop.
So it's nice.
We're going to end tonight by doing a crowdfund for the movie of the Kilbegan Distillery. The story's already written. It's all there for us.
Love it. No, it is. It's a beautiful place, though.
We're going to dive into more stories over the course of the evening because there's so many things to touch on, so much history. And what I love about the island of Ireland and its whiskey distilling history and past is so interwoven and interconnected that over the course of tonight, you're going to hear stories of people who you've heard of in other places, people from other distilleries, other distilling families who have passed through or been connected somehow to the Kilbegan Distillery. And it just shows how small and how connected Ireland is, and how small and community-like the whiskey world is in Ireland. So I'm excited to share some of those stories. We have 3 whiskeys ahead of us. We're going to crack into the traditional Kilbegan traditional in a little bit. Should we start by having Paddy come back in and give us an old tune to set us off for the first drink? Will we?
I love Christy's comment there. We need a Kilbegan movie. I agree.
We do. We do.
Yeah, absolutely, Paddy. If you're there.
There he is.
How are you doing?
How's it going, lads? How are you doing?
Very well.
Did you carry that hip flask with you all day? You did?
Yeah, I was keeping me nice and warm there. But anyway, you know what? I've known about Kilbegan whiskey for a long time, and great reputation. And I must say that has an amazing tradition and history. But just to know that they have great ambassadors. I know there's many people that's looking in here as well tonight. But we talk about the Lock-in. Well, no better family than the Egan family to enjoy the Lock-in, because we've had a couple of Lock-ins with the Egan family from here. In fact, my wife and I were in Dingle a couple of years ago, and it's interesting. We were staying in a house down outside Dingle, and we went into the local Super Value to get a bottle of whiskey. We got something anyway, and I think we ordered it at 10:32. Okay, 10:32. And the lady wouldn't serve us. She says, we can't sell anymore. It's past 10:30. And of course, I was, effing and blinding. And we said, we'll go next door. We'll have a drink. And who did I meet but Michael's parents? And we had a Lock-in, and we had an almighty savage session. And I think Michael and his family were over at another friend of ours, stag party in New Orleans, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And before you know it, the Irish were texting back around the world saying they were singing here, we were singing here. And, you just never know when you'll get the Lock-in and a bit of a sing-song, But all wrapped around a plop of whiskey, as the fella says. So,
yeah.
Listen, before you jump that song there now, let me tell the audience, let me give them some instructions, because they have the cheapest ticket in town tonight. They've paid nothing for the privilege of your music. So, but I will ask something of them in return. And for those of you who are tuned in across Facebook and Twitter and Periscope and YouTube, here's what I ask of you. Press share now to share with your friends the crack that's happening on a Friday night on the Lock-in Live here with Stories and Sips and Kilbegan and Paddy, so that more people can join in with us. So whether you're members of Facebook groups, or you are part of Facebook pages, or you've got a Facebook profile, or you've just got your email address, do us all a favor and press share so that more people can join in with us. We're going to be here for about 8 or 9 hours tonight. Paddy doesn't know this yet, but this is a real Lock-in. We don't leave here now till the sun comes back up. So watch behind Paddy's head as the sun goes down and then slowly comes back up again.
Good man, Paddy.
I'm stocked up here, so there's no problem. You can go all night.
Lovely.
Right. So what are we going to sing now? What song are we going to break into?
We'll see about this here now. Maybe we might do a little bit of Elvis, I suppose. A bit of Irish Elvis, This is called The Blue Moon of Kentucky.
Right. Give it to us.
Blue moon of Kentucky, keep on shining. Shine on the one that's gone and made you. Blue moon of Kentucky, keep on shining. Shine on the one that's gone and made you blue. It was all a moonlit night. The stars shine so bright and whispered on high. Your love said goodbye. Blue moon of Kentucky, keep on shining. Shine on the one that's gone and made you blue. I said, blue moon of Kentucky, keep on shining. Shine on the one that's gone and made you blue. Ah, blue moon of Kentucky, keep on shining. Shine on the one that's gone and made you blue. It was on the moonlit night. The stars shine so bright. And we're on high, your love said goodbye. I said, blue moon of Kentucky, keep on shining. Shine on the one that's gone and made you blue. It was on a moonlit night. The stars shine so bright. And we're on high, your love said goodbye. I said, blue moon of Kentucky, keep on shining. Shine on the one that's gone and made you blue. There you go.
Good man, Paddy.
Unreal. Did Elvis own a Bowron, did he?
Oh, he did, of course. Yeah. Up in Fairhill.
That's where he ended up. At it all. He's up in Fairhill.
I'll tell you a good one, actually, and this is true. So Elvis died in 1979, and my mother, Lizzie, she loved Elvis, and she put in, we had the Cork Evening Echo, and everyone will put in the memorials, fondly remembering someone who passed away. And my mother put in a memorial for Elvis once, and fondly missed by Lizzie in Cork, So if you're missed by Lizzie in Cork, you're doing well.
That's lovely. That's lovely. I love it. Paddy, you're a legend. And we have some questions wondering the connection between Ireland, a Bowron, and whiskey. And I think Michael's going to pick up that as a great segue into our first whiskey. Paddy, we'll come back to you.
Slán.
Cheers, Paddy. Slán. Super segue in. And I'm so glad Paddy chose that, because our first whiskey that we're going to taste tonight and talk about is Kilbegan Original, or Kilbegan Blended Whiskey. So we have, for those of you who have it in front of you, there's many different styles of Irish whiskey. This is a blended whiskey. So a blend basically means a blend of different ingredients, Barry. So in this case, it's grain or corn and malted barley. So about 75% corn, give or take a couple of percent, 25% malted barley. So there's a particularly high malted barley content in this, which lends to a very fruity flavor. And the fruity flavor that you're going to get off this, there's a DNA, as we say, there's a DNA that's present in all of the Kilbegan Distilling Company whiskies, whether it's a single malt Tyrconnell, a Connemara peated single malt, or any of the Kilbegan whiskies, and that's green apple, citrus notes, and that's basically down to the pot stills that we use. And we have pot stills with very narrow necks, and that encourages a lot of reflux and only lets the lightest spirit out of the actual pot still, which is going to produce a very light, fruity distillate. And that's evident in all of our whiskies, including this Kilbegan blended whiskey. I should say very quickly, I mentioned the McManus family on our intro, and I as I was researching for this program, or for this show, I was searching a program that I heard about a couple of years ago, and I still can't find it. So if any of your guests are on that have seen this, it's the UK's Most Haunted, the show on BBC or Sky One. And I have a bottle here that I got on week one, believe it or not, of my tenure with Kilbegan Distilling Company. So 2012, we were at the distillery, and I managed to get myself a small bottle, and that's what's left in it. I swear that's not water. And the McManus family handed the reins over to the Cod family at the end, or very, very early, end of the 1700s, very early 1800s. And John McManus, Matthew McManus' son, was running the distillery, and he was actually executed for his participation in the United Irishmen and his political views. But according to Derek, I have his name here, Derek Akara from BBC's UK's Most Haunted, this isn't the only spirit that's hanging around distillery today. So there's we produce a very light, fruity distillate, and there's also other spirits floating around the distillery as well. But for the purpose of this whiskey right here, so this is a blended whiskey. We're going to try a small batch rye, and we're also going to try a single pot still, which are one different style of whiskey, or potentially two, which we can talk about. But yeah, so this is a blend of malted barley and corn, and so it's about 4 years old. So 4 years living in a bourbon barrel. So to Paddy's song there. Pardon me?
Only bourbon, is it? Bourbon only?
All bourbon, 100% bourbon. And in 2014, late 2014, Beam Global. So we got acquired by Beam in 2012, Kilbegan. And then in 2014, we were acquired by Suntory. So we're now Beam Suntory. But we exclusively now source all of our barrels from Kentucky. So from Maker's Mark, from Jim Beam. So if you walk in to the distillery now, all of the newer barrels that you're going to see coming into the warehouse are all Beam and Maker's Mark Knob Creek casks that previously held some of the world's finest bourbon, I should put out. So a lot of the fruit, a lot of the fruitiness will come from that pot still, and then the caramel sort of soft vanilla notes are 100% coming from the bourbon barrel. And this is bottled at 80 proof or 40%. So for me, anyway, I absolutely get the green apple citrus notes that's yielded from the pot still. So what we do, a little toast before we have a sip.
You'll have to give us a toast.
My favorite toast of all time is the friendship toast. There are good ships, there are wood ships, there are ships that sail the sea, but the best ships are friendships. So may they always be. Sláinte.
Sláinte.
Cheers. So you get that I mean, for me, it's always been the light, fruity distillate or the taste that comes through.
Like a little bit of a digestive biscuit almost on the palate there.
Yeah, for sure. And this stands up so well, Barry, from a price point of view, the recommended retail price is about $22. So it's an affordable Irish whiskey. But quality, it's double distilled. So a lot of our competitors triple distill all of their whiskeys. And it's a common misconception actually within the Irish whiskey industry that Irish whiskey is triple distilled, Scotch is double distilled. In actuality, there's no regulations written in the technical file to say how many times you can and can't distill. So when John Teeling, Willie MacArthur, and the team reopened the distillery in 1989, they set their sights on bringing out all brands like Kilbegan, like Tyrconnell, and also doing things a little differently. So they decided to double distill versus triple distill. And that we like to say that double distillation yields a much lighter whiskey that's closer to the original mash and the original flavor profile of that mash.
Help our audience understand where this is distilled. So there are some questions in the comments about the origin of this spirit. So the Kilbegan Distilling Company comprises really of two distilleries, doesn't it?
Yes, 100%. So this would be, so everything we make at Kilbegan from 2010 on. So we began the restoration process. Well, the restoration committee did in the 80s. When the distillery was back open in 1989, they set their sights on one day redistilling again there. So in 2007, our fermenters were installed, and then in 2010, the distillation side of the distillery was back up and running. So we now make a lot of malt whiskey at Kilbegan. So everything that we make at Kilbegan goes into LTOs and innovative whiskies like rye and pot still, and a lot of the malt that we make goes into this Kilbegan blend. But the majority of whiskey in the bottle here and in the casks are made at our sister distillery, which is Cooley in County Louth. And Cooley's a bigger operation. It was an old potato plant, and was built, and John Teeling bought it in 1987, turned it into a whiskey distillery, and which was amazing, because it was the almost one of the backbones of the Irish whiskey industry for many years, and a lot of our competitors have products from there. But yeah, so we have two big 16,000 litre pot stills, twin pot stills at the Cooley distillery. We double distill everything, and I think three-story column stills. So we produce a lot of grain at grain distillate at Cooley. So this product would be, the vast majority of it would be produced at Cooley distillery.
See if I've got some pictures here. We've got some, that's in the outside here. That's the water wheel. Now that's not still functional, is it? Or is it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, it's still turning. Depends on if people have gone there and it hasn't been running, it depends on the height of the river. So if the river's too low or too high, they flip it off.
And there's the river there. So the river goes up and down based on something very variable in Ireland called the rain.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So this is the courtyard, and there's actually a great photo of, I think you have one of the reverse of that. And there's a great photo, yeah, right there. And there's one from that RTE archives documentary of the old courtyard as well, which is exactly the same, but
not sure if I have that one there. But in any case, so that's the old courtyard.
It's exactly the same without the fresh paint.
So all you have to do is throw a lick of paint on there. And the lovely thing about whiskey is that there's many distilleries use stills that have been around for donkey's years altogether. And you talked about the pot still being, what, 180 years old in Kilbegan?
85 odd years old, yeah. It's an old Tullamore still that they put in. And for most of its life, for a lot of its life, it was distilling water. I'm sad to say that it is on its last legs. And it's only a matter of time before it's decommissioned and moved on. And I think when that happens, we need to have some sort of celebration for its life and what it's produced. But we are so proud of the fact that the two of our most recent whiskies that we've released, two of the most award-winning whiskies within the category, I think, and Kilbegan Small Batch Rye got named Best Newcomer to the category in 2017 and 18, I believe. And it's all 100% from that old still, which is great.
Those who are joining us tonight from Ireland are kicking themselves at the price of whiskies in the United States. The fact that you can get hold of the Kilbegan blend for, like you said, from $22 and up. There's no whiskies in Ireland at that price point, really, is there? Due to customs and excise.
I had it like that. Your Lock-in Livestream last week with the Cask Crusader was amazing, and he spoke a lot of sense. You know, it doesn't make much sense that a bottle of Kilbegan in my local binnies is cheaper than it is at the local off license in Kilbegan itself. And it's unfortunate because we have a selection here, and as a result of that price point, we have the ability to explore many different Irish whiskies than a lot of people at home.
The American market, I'm sure, was a massive shock to your system coming in here trying to teach Americans about Irish whiskey, to try and figure out it's really 50 different countries, isn't it, that are woven together tenuously in some kind of federal system.
Yeah, it's madness. And it works for the States. We hire ambassadors through the IBEC program, or the Export Orientation Program, which I'm sure you're familiar with. So every time we hire a new ambassador or the 18-month cycle finishes and we hire a new ambassador into a control state, we're redoing the training process on the control state and how it works. And there's many different states with many different rules. And then you have the likes of Texas, which is a 3-tier system, you know, introducing a liquor store tier, which makes things a little bit more complicated. So it's not as simple as off or distillery to the store, or just having a supplier bringing it there.
And that's something that's been in place since Prohibition era. This 3-tier system. I remember in Ohio. I remember they were trying to shift some, or they were discontinuing the old Kilbegan traditional, and then they were introducing the new label, and so they had moved the old bottle down to, I think, $16 a bottle. So I picked up a case. I picked up 12 of them at $16, which is remarkable, which is what, 12, 13 euros a bottle, which is absolutely incredible.
Right. So I have all the labels here. This is the older,
the
older blend. And then this is very old, which probably would have been launched in the States here in the early 90s, which is this bottle here, which I'm sure a lot of people have. And then there's one in between, which I know you have, Barry, because I've seen it on one of your videos before in the background. The label in between this and this.
I have, I have that one. I have that in Ohio, and I don't have it with me here, but yeah, I have that one in Ohio as well. That was the one I got the cases of.
Yeah.
The case, which is amazing.
It's unbelievable what you find sometimes what you find in liquor stores. You know, you can find some old bottlings or some which are now very rare. Like I was telling our team on Thursday on our weekly calls that I picked up 2 bottles of Kilbegan 15-year-old that was here years ago. And it was only about 3 years ago in Indiana. I picked them up for about $70 a bottle in a random store. And he said, "This isn't moving." And I said, "Which ones?" "Those 2. And I said, "Right, I'll buy them right now."
There you go. Yeah, it's great to find dusty old bottles on shelves that have been forgotten about over the years. To our audience who are tuned in, if you've just tuned in, I'm here with Michael Egan, who's the national US brand ambassador for Kilbegan. We're on a Kilbegan session, and a session isn't complete without really 2 things. One is whiskey, and the second is music. We'll be bringing back in Paddy, our resident musician, in a minute or 2. Maybe he'll give us another tune. He'll be worn ragged from all the requests we'll have from him. So 2 things I'll ask of you as an audience. One is, if you've got any questions, put them in the comments anytime. Let us know if you've tried Kilbegan, if you've tried the Kilbegan blend or any of the Kilbegan whiskies. And then also, if you've got some requests, Paddy may take a request or 2 or 3, but he'll rely on the claps and the cheers in the audience to get him going. So let him know.
I see Cassandra's comment there, and maybe that's a request for Finnegan's Wake from Paddy if he has it.
There we go.
We might have.
We might get a wake out of Paddy in a minute. John says if anybody calls with a 15-year-old not moving in New Jersey, let him know, and he'd be happy to pick that up.
Neve is your man. Neve Breen, our ambassador there, John, so she can help you out.
Jeff is in Indiana, and Jeff's a regular friend of the show, and he's got a Kilbegan 21-year-old he took a picture of, which he says must be from the Cooley distillery. He'd be right, wouldn't he?
100%. Unless you have a distillery reserve bottle of Kilbegan, the only 100% made matured Kilbegan whiskies that we have out today are rye and pot still. So Kilbegan 21, Kilbegan 18, 15 would all be Cooley distillery liquid.
So for those of you that are following along with these whiskies, in a moment or 2, we're going to move on to the Kilbegan small batch rye, which is a very innovative whiskey for the Irish whiskey market. I'm excited to dive into it. I've actually only had the smallest sip of it in Ireland at Whiskey Live a year and a half ago, and I have not even touched this bottle yet, so it'll be my first proper sip with you, Michael. We'll have that together in a second, but before we do that, we might will we call upon Paddy for another old tune?
Absolutely, if he's there,
if he hasn't run away from us,
if he hasn't opened that flask.
You're on standby for us, Paddy.
Oh, good stuff. Anyway, we were you're getting a nice drop of whiskey in there now, and actually lovely presentation, I must say. But as the whiskey has gone down the scornock, and we're thinking about the great songs and stories that may have a whiskey element, or it's funny when someone is a bit tipsy. Some of the great, particularly the Irish imagination, comes out all the more. And James Joyce was one of those guys when he imagined life, death, and birth, death, and resurrection, all through the story of Finnegan's Wake. We all know the story of Tim Finnegan. He falls and breaks his skull, and they take him back to a wake, because if there's one thing that the Irish know, we know how to have funerals. We're very good at it. But anyway, this is Finnegan's Wake, and I have a little bit of a story as we go into it. So let's see how it goes. Big Mr. Finnegan with the shuffle in hand. Freemansmore lived in the broadest way imaginable, in his rush lip, too far back for Monsieur Wedges, before Joshua and judges had given us numbers, or Alviligus had committed Deuteronomy. Now during mighty odd years, this man of hod the cement and edifices in Toper's top, piled bildung, supra bildung, upon the banks of the livers for the sauces. A one worth of a skyscraper entirely originating from next to nothing. With the burning bush above its bubble top, and with Lawrence O'Toole's is flattering up, but comets of buckets flattering down. Of the first was he to bear arms in the air sing about. Ho, 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 Mr. Finn, you're going to be fined again. Ha, 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 Mr. Fun, you're going to be Mr. Finnegan. But then he stuttered from the ladder. Done. He was done. Then Finnegan lived in Walking Street, a gentle Irishman, mighty odd. He had a broad book, rich and sweet, and her eyes in the morning carried a hod. You see the sort of a tippler's way, for the love of the liquor he was torn, and the helping on his stage stayed a drop of the crater in the morn. Like full of dado, dance to your partner round the floor, you trotter shake. Wasn't it the truth? I told you lots of fun at Finnegan's Wake. One morning Tim was feeling rather full, his head felt heavy, he began to shake. Well, he fell from the ladder and he broke his skull, and they took him home, his corpse to wake. They wound him up in a nice clean sheet, and they laid him all up on the bed, with a bottle of whiskey at his feet and a barrel of porter at his head. Whack full of Dano, dance to your partner round the floor, you trotter shake. Wasn't it the truth? I told you lots of fun at Finnegan's Wake. His friends assembled at the wake, and Mrs. Finnegan called for lunch. Lunch! First they brought in tea and cake, then pipe tobacco and whiskey punch. Then Biddy O'Connor, she began to cry. Such a lovely corpse did you ever see? 10 a morning, why did you die? Had I shut your gob, says Biddy McGee. Pipe full of dado, dance to your partner round the floor, you trotter shake. Wasn't it the truth? I told you lots of fun at Finnegan's Wake. Then Biddy O'Connor took up the job. Oh, Biddy, says she, you're wrong, I'm sure. And Biddy gave her a belt and a gob and left her sprawling on the floor. Then the war did so enraged, it was woman and man to man. Shillelagh was on a rage and row and eruption soon began. Like full of Dano, dance to your partner on the floor, you trotter shake. Wasn't it the truth? I told you lots of fun at Finnegan's Wake. Then Mickey Malone, he raised his head, when a bottle of Kilbegan flew at him. It must have fallen on the bed, or the liquor scattered over Tim. Be God, he revives, see how he revives. Then Finnegan rising from the dead, saying, why is all running round like crazy? Thunder and lightning, do you think I'm dead? Pipe full of Dano, dance to your partner round the floor, you trotter shake. Wasn't it the truth? I told you lots of fun at Finnegan's Wake. Pipe full of Dano, dance to your partner round the floor, you trotter shake. Wasn't it the truth? I told you lots of fun at Finnegan's Wake. Up-a-da-da-dum, meadow.
Good man, Paddy.
There you go.
Love it.
We're in the middle of a session. We're having a session, lad.
Love it. Barry, I can't see the comments, but I'm getting texts off the ambassadors saying they're all good.
I'm seeing hundreds of comments coming through here on my screen. And ladies and gentlemen,
if you don't mind, I'd like to do a Kerry blessing here to all of you, because there was a nice little one done earlier, and seeing as I have a little drop in here, and this is for especially for you, Barry. Okay. that the frost might never afflict your spuds, that your cabbages will always be free from worms, that your she-goat will always dread the puck, and should you, Barry Chandler, come into possession of a mare donkey, may she be in foal, and a bottle of Kilbegan. Amen.
You. Good man, Paddy.
Cheers.
Slodge.
Indeed. Paddy,
Very good,
people are wondering in the comments, where are you? And some people are saying, well, you're in a living room or a dining room, but where in the world are you?
I'm at home. I'm at home in Chicago, and it's a nice little evening here. I just got home not long after work and sitting down here, and I said, I better log on here and have a bit of a drop in and a bit of a chat. And sure, isn't that what the Friday is all about? And you know, these are unprecedented times, but it's amazing the Irish hospitality and that sense of togetherness. And of course, through a drop of whiskey, it's the whiskey, of course, you have the brand and the history, but it's that Irish brand, isn't it? It's that Irish sense of togetherness. We have a saying in the Irish language, "An ba uil da chéile," fellow feeling for each other. And you know what? This is the new reality that we live in. But you know, we are together. We are supporting each other, and we're keeping that sense of Irishness going. And here through the great Kilbegan whiskey. So fair play.
Fair play, Paddy. Good man yourself. Great comments, great reception to your tunes, and there's some requests in there that we'll come to a little bit later. There's some ridiculous requests for duets and the three of us to sing together. But sure, who knows? Sure, we have three bottles. We have 3 bottles of whiskey. You never know what would happen.
I don't think you have the sound set up, Barry, for that, do you?
Well, sure, listen, whether we have the sound set up or not, we might have to sing.
It'll happen.
That'd be lovely.
Paddy, we'll come back to you in a bit for a few more tunes, if you don't mind.
Sean.
Cheers, Paddy.
Sean. He's some man.
Oh, he's great. And for those of your listeners or your viewers interested in Paddy, he does an amazing session called the Sunday Sessions with the Galway Arms Facebook page in Chicago every Sunday night. And it's 2 hours of and no Sunday is the same, Barry. It's 2 hours of amazing Irish music and everything from literally from Finnegan's Wake to the Blue Moon of Kentucky, you know, classical stuff that Paddy does. He has a voice. I played in the Chicago finals before we went on to the North American finals about 2 years ago, and Paddy every year does the national anthem down in Gaelic Park, and it's great. You hear him singing on a Sunday morning the national anthem in Gaelic Park, and then you see him in the Galway Arms that Sunday evening. Finnegan's Wake.
I'll have to tune into that now on live on a Sunday, because that'll be sufficient time for me to have recovered from the Friday. Sunday will be the perfect time to tune in there.
Very enjoyable.
Let's throw up a trivia question. So we told you earlier there'd be some surprises for those of you in the audience. You may get contacted by us if you're lucky. And one of the things we want to do is we want to put up a trivia question and see if you answer the trivia question in the comments. And one of you may be lucky. Who knows? You might end up with a pair of Kilbegan socks or a lovely Kilbegan hat that I have here. I won't give you this one because this is the one that I was wearing earlier in the week. And it's actually perfect for my Irish head in San Diego to protect me from the sun. But in any case, we have a trivia question for you that we want to put up here. And the trivia question is this. What did Ennius Coffee invent that is now used in distilleries around the world? What did Ennius Coffee invent that is now used in distilleries around the world? If you know that answer, put it in the comments, whether you're on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, and we will look through those answers, and we might find some people to surprise after the show is over tonight. What did Ennius Coffee invent that is now used in distilleries around the world? All right, so we are going to move on because we're thirsty, Michael, and we're going to, what are we going to taste next?
Well, we're going to move on to our Kilbegan small batch rye, which I have here. Barry, you have it in front of you, and I know
I have
judging comments that you threw up, a lot of viewers have it in front of them as well. This is a very unique whiskey in the sense that it's kind of in a category on its own. in terms of labeling and description. It's and you haven't tried this really before, right? You had a sip of whiskey, or whiskey live.
I've not really properly tried it and understood it or enjoyed it yet, so I'm relying on tonight's event to get me into it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's a whiskey that has won multiple awards, World Whiskey Awards. It got a category winner in 2017, double gold at the New York International Spirits Competition in 2019, and in 2017 and 18, Irish Whiskey's best newcomer or best new Irish whiskey to the category. So it's something that we're extremely proud of. It's the first whiskey that we've launched at Kilbegan. That's 100% made in the US, I should say. That's 100% made and matured at the Kilbegan Distillery. So, as I said to you, the Kilbegan Distillery was reopened in 1989. The Restoration Committee had done a lot of work, and then John Teeling, William MacArthur, and the team set their sights on one day restoring the actual distilling side of the distillery. So, 2007, the fermenters were put in. It became maybe like 50%. Functional, and 2010 is when the distilleries got back up and running, and this is one of which is the old Tullamore Dew distillery that's 185 years old today, or now. And the team at Kilbegan set their sights on restoring everything in the distillery, and then reintroducing some of the old mash bills that are historically from the Irish whiskey industry, and one of which was a mash bill of malted barley, unmalted barley, and rye. And rye isn't really a grain that you see within the Irish industry, within the Irish whiskey industry. It's a grain that would have been used pre-prohibition a lot. Rye, wheat, oats, malted barley, unmalted barley. So historically, this recipe right here was an old pot still Irish whiskey. And for those of you who don't know, pot still Irish whiskey is a style of Irish whiskey, like we've had blended Irish whiskey, and now we're moving into pot still. And pot still dates back to the malt tax of 1785, where malted barley was actually taxed. So the Irish distillers, being as crafty as they were, threw in enough unmalted barley, not to spoil the brew, but to prove a point and pay as little tax as possible, which makes complete sense. And as a result of that, the style of Irish whiskey pot still was coined, and it's malted barley and unmalted barley. So the definition today of pot still Irish whiskey is malted barley and unmalted barley, 30%, no more than 30% of each, and no more than 5% of a third grain. And that's in the current technical file for Irish whiskey. Now this whiskey right here is made up of, and that was 2014, right? Yeah.
So no less than 30%, is it? No less than 30% of each, and
then no more than 5% of a third grain. Yeah.
Of third grain, so, right.
And that's the most recent update of the Irish whiskey technical file. And this guy right here is malted barley, unmalted barley, so 35% of each, and 30% rye. So this is a very, very high rye content for an Irish whiskey, but too high for it to be a pot still Irish whiskey.
So when this was first distilled, Michael, it was distilled before the technical file, the legal definition, the European Union and Irish definition of what Irish whiskey can be in terms of its various styles. So this was distilled as pot still. The definitions changed while it was maturing. So by the time it got to the bottle, it couldn't anymore be called a pot still. It had to be renamed. Is that right?
Yeah. So this was laid down in 2010 when and I'm not sure the exact definition of pot still in 2010. I assume it was malted barley and unmalted barley and a third grain. And this was laid down as an old 1800s recipe that was used in Kilbegan a century ago, and laid down with the aim in 8 years or whenever to release it as a pot still Irish whiskey with rye, an old heritage mash bill from the distillery. So I remember tasting, looking at the barrels, tasting a little bit of it back in 2012, 13, and then it went down, we forgot about it, it was there. And then in 16, 17, when we started literally talking about label design and what it was going to be released as, the technical file had changed. So we had to go back to the governing body behind the Irish whiskey industry and talk about, hey, what can we release this as? This is by, and you had a great conversation with Peter Mulryan last week or 2 weeks ago, and I agree with his points that a lot of the industry their hands are tied in terms of what they can and can't not what they can produce, but what they can label it as. And we as a result of the technical file change, we couldn't call this a pot still Irish whiskey. So we sat down with the Irish Whiskey Association and we came up with a small batch rye label. And
where does this fit, like within the? So the three real definitions are single pot still, single grain, and malt, and then you've got the blend, which would be a combination of 2 or 3 of those. Does this fit under one of those? Would this be classed as single grain?
So sorry again. Say it again. So you have the blend.
You have single grain, single pot still. Well, you've grain, pot still, and malt are the 3 classifications within Irish whiskey, and then you've got Irish whiskey kind of lives outside that nebulously.
Yeah. So this is kind of in a category of its own, really. It is by all. If you were to take away the pot still or the label, or forget about the technical file, it's looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, but it's not a duck, you know. And it's phenomenal. Like the taste, the flavor profile is exactly what we read that the heritage mash bills taste like, and the old whiskies tasted like. But yeah, so we kind of carved out our own category within Irish whiskey, and it's small batch rye, and there isn't really another Irish whiskey on the market with rye or 30% rye.
Yes.
Which is amazing. And that rye, the malted barley and unmalted barley provide that nutty note. And we've all tried pot still Irish whiskies before, so we're familiar with the flavor profile right there. And we're going to try Kilbegan pot still with oats in a minute. But the rye really, really provides the spicy flavor profile that you get from that we're all familiar with American rye.
So let's talk about American rye, because American rye is a very different beast than Irish whiskies that contain rye, and we've got some great comments from our Irish friends like Omar, that's Dram Good, who goes to great pains in the comments to let us know that he was among the first to try this at a Dingle Ambassadors tasting with the Irish Whiskey Society. It's very important that everybody knows, Omar, you were the first to try this. But you say that it's not an American rye classification, because we know for it to be a rye whiskey in the United States, it must contain a minimum of 51% rye. Yeah. Whereas here in Ireland, 30% rye still allows us to call this, well, it's just a very vague, there's a very vague area of Irish whiskey.
This is it. It's a small batch rye. And I see you threw up, I'm delighted that John Cashman is watching here. John was pivotal in launching this. And I had the pleasure of being with John launching this in Dead Rabbit in New York in 2017 or early 2018. But yeah, so it's a small batch rye. So if you look at the label, it's Kilbegan Irish whiskey, small batch rye. So it's not a rye whiskey. So that's not what we're claiming at all. And honestly, Barry, what is the definition of a small batch? You know, I it's tough. I was at a tasting a few years ago with Fred No, who's master distiller of Jim Beam and biggest bourbon in the world, and Knob Creek is a small batch, and he was asked in front of 100+ people, what's a small batch? And his response was, well, it's smaller than the batch that we made before. So it's subjective. Absolutely, yeah. So
well, I have a very important question. The most important question that we might ask about this: can we drink it?
We can, of course. Yeah, we're getting there. So on the nose, it's a completely different nose than you would have gotten from Kilbegan original. You know, so you get a lot of the fruit, the green apple, as I said, citrus notes off of the blend. Right away, I'm getting that rye spice here. The malted barley, unmalted barley nuttiness comes out. Especially the unmalted barley comes out, but then the rye is there. So we'll have a taste and then we'll talk about it.
Yeah, please.
So
dying of thirst.
Toast, will we?
Please, you give us a toast.
Here's the fighting, cheating, stealing, and drinking. If you fight, may you fight alongside a brother. If you cheat, may you cheat death. If you steal, may you steal the heart of a loved one. And if you drink, may you drink Kilbegan. Sláinte.
Hey, sláinte.
So it's soft, it's sweet. There is that DNA that I spoke about earlier on about with the fruity citrus notes. But then that swallow, it lingers, the rye lingers, it's still there.
Very soft on the palate when it first comes in. It almost takes 2 or 3 seconds for the mouth to realize that it has been delivered, this whiskey.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's the rye. And one of our biggest, not a challenge, but our biggest opportunities to introduce an Irish rye, if you like, or an Irish whiskey with rye to an American consumer. For the last couple of years, I've told people the rye content, and it's not as much as an American rye, or they automatically compare it to a 51+% rye from the US, and
yes.
And then as a result of that, because it has rye on the bottle and it's green, it's automatically compared on a liquor store shelf. If owners are putting it up, or liquor store employees are putting it on the shelf, sometimes it falls beside American rye. So if you're a rye drinker and you like that high rye content, maybe this isn't the whiskey for you. This is more comparable to an Irish pot still.
It is very different to anything else that we've tried, or I've tried in the Irish whiskey category. And I definitely get the kind of like that creamy, peppery, not like it's as if, but there's something overtaking that pot still spice. And is there like a white pepper as opposed to a heavier, spicier pepper, if that's even possible from the pot still? But there's something creamier and maltier almost about the rye. I've tried some ryes here in the US that are almost like coffee flavor. They go that far into the flavor profile. It's almost like there's a coffee note to them. Yeah. I need to dive into this some more. It's changing sip by sip. We just need to keep sipping.
So you find that the rye spice lingers, but it lessens every time you go back to it, and it's sweeter, and there's more almost candy notes coming out from the whiskey every sip you take.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very, very unique flavor profile, and I get that sweetness now that you mention it. Would you mix this with anything, or would you always drink this neat yourself?
No, so this is phenomenal. I like to drink it neat with an ice cube. I like my whiskey, to be honest, on the rocks, in general. But this in an old fashioned, Barry, is amazing. Or any rye, any classic American cocktail, any cocktail that you would put US rye whiskey into, this stands up so well in that. So it's 43% alcohol. So there's a 86 proof. So there's a higher ABV than the original Kilbegan that we just tried. So it stands up that little bit more in cocktails. But if you have this at home, try it in old fashioned. And the nuttiness from the malted, unmalted barley stands up, and then pair that with the rye, which makes for an exceptional cocktail.
There's what's coming through to me now as I sip and think and listen is Werther's Original that's been coated in pepper. There's a sweetness and a caramel, like as if you dropped your Werther's Original into a bowl of pepper.
Well, it's funny, you know what? I've heard Werther's. No, I'm a big fan of Werther's Original, but I've heard that as a descriptor for the next whiskey before.
Is that right?
So obviously that is coming from the malted, unmalted barley content. Yeah.
Interesting. I'm going to try this in old fashioned. I'm a massive old fashioned fan. Despite me spending most of my waking hours talking about whiskey and chatting with interesting people about whiskey, I can't drink whiskey 7 nights a week straight. I have to find other ways to get it into me.
Yeah. And if there's one positive I think to take out of quarantine, and since Friday the 13th, the 2 days before Paddy's Day, when everything went into lockdown, it's that I know myself, I've become more experimental in the kitchen in terms of, well, not just cooking, but making cocktails. I'd be the first to put my hand up and say I'm not the best behind a bar, and I'm comfortable behind a bar. But now we're fortunate to be part of Beam Suntory, so we have access to some of the most amazing minds, both on and off premise, in America, around the world, and we can tap into our team. We've done cocktail classes with our mixologists, and we learn the basics about making cocktails that our whiskeys can sit in, like old fashions, Manhattans, whiskey sours, which I love. So it's great.
I'm cursed with what's known in my family as the Chandler stomach, which means that the older I get, the more I have to avoid anything that's too bitter or acidic or sour. And so I find myself going to sweet things like old fashions, and you'd swear I was 80 years of age the way I have to. My stomach has to, like, I'd say in 10 years' time, I'll be eating like a prisoner. I'll be eating dry bread and a glass of water with this very sensitive stomach in my family. You may, so I might not be able to get into all those, but I'm the same as you. I've been buying all kinds of cocktail ingredients, vermouths and bitters to expand the palate and learn. And as I always say on these live streams, anywhere that anyone will listen, I am no whiskey expert. I'm an enthusiast on a journey like everybody else, and I'm finding different ways to incorporate whiskey and different ingredients into cocktails and drinks. So that's the next one I will try for an old fashioned. Yeah. I had an old fashioned before I came on tonight with a redbreast cask strength, but this will be the next one. Yeah.
Let us know how it goes.
Tell me this. You mentioned Paddy sang a song about Kentucky. We had a segue into at the start of the show with the Kilbegan blend and aged in bourbon barrels. What is the Kilbegan small batch rye aged in?
So all bourbon as well. So this is about all 7 years old in all bourbon. Yeah. All and bourbon. So is our pot still. Yeah. 100% bourbon barrels. We for our older whiskey, some of the older whiskeys that bear the Kilbegan name, we use fortified wine casks as finishers. And then, as you know, for our Tyrconnell 10-year-old cask finishes range, and then the 2 of the 3 LTOs that we've released over the last 2-3 years have cask finishes on them as well.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So our distilling team in Cooley, who also work very closely with our Kilbegan distilling team, work hand in hand with our team in Kentucky. Teams in Kentucky, I should say.
It's I'm always fascinated by the origin of the Irish-American connection to bourbon barrels and the remarkable lobbying that took place on behalf of the Coopers in America to ensure that bourbon could only be aged one time in a virgin American oak barrel, and so that they'd need a second barrel. And who could they possibly turn to make that barrel? Only the Coopers, that were clearly well represented in negotiations to document and to codify what bourbon was. And us in Ireland have been the beneficiaries of such a statute in the American law that we now get those bourbon barrels in the droves every year.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, we joke around with we used to do a thing called the Great Whiskey Debate with Irish, bourbon, Canadian, and Scotch, and it was myself and John did one as well, but it was myself, Fred No, or Adam Harris, and Dan Tulio and Simon Brooking. And it was always Simon and I. So Simon represented Scotch and I was Irish. And it was always us slagging Fred and bourbon, saying that we recycle in Ireland. Unlike you guys, we'll take them and use them again, whereas you use them once and get rid of them. What a fantastic law written into to bourbon legislation.
That's right. That's right. We should all have lobbyists represent us for our various needs.
Absolutely.
Before we move on for another old tune, I see backstage area there. The audience doesn't have access to this wonderful view of Paddy rehearsing backstage with his hip flask. We'll bring Paddy on in a second for another tune. But before we do that, I mentioned at the start of the episode here of the show, Kilbegan were kind enough to send me a pair of socks, amongst other things. But we have wonderful things that may end up in people's hands if they were lucky, like lovely Kilbegan Glencairns. And we want to run another little opportunity for that to happen. A little surprise and delight. So if you open up another tab on your computer and take a little picture of the lock-in, maybe with your glass in front of it, take a little picture of us. Maybe you raise your glass up and say cheers if you have a bottle of Kilbegan or a glass of Kilbegan, even better, and share that photo in the Irish Whiskey Fans of America Facebook group. You may be lucky enough to find yourself the proud owner of some Kilbegan swag. So take a photo of the lock-in, share it in the Irish Whiskey Fans of America Facebook group, and you may be the lucky recipient. We may have some surprise and delight moments throughout the night, and over the next few days, we'll get back in touch with those of you who may have been lucky. All right, let me have a look at the comments. Brian says, the best thing to come out of Kentucky are empty bourbon barrels heading to Ireland.
Good man, Brian.
It's a bit like the best thing to come out of Dublin is the road to Cork. Isn't that right, Michael?
How about that? I don't know.
So, listen, we're going to keep drinking. I'm very much enjoying this. This is the one that on the first sip I couldn't tell what it was. The second sip I started to become familiar with it. Third and fourth sip we're on first name terms. It's a fascinating combination of spice and sweetness, and that's going into an old fashioned as soon as we finish here tonight. I'm going to make myself an old fashioned. I think we need an old tune. What do you think?
I agree with you. What are we thinking? Any requests?
Who could we possibly have to give us an old tune? Only the man from Fairhill in Cork.
Here's up the mall, says the boys of Fairhill. But I was listening there to the history about the barrels and all that, and of course in Cork years ago we had Irish distillers done by the Mercy Hospital, and I used to work there for a little while. But of course, there's a history to this particular song, and that years ago, just like sending the bourbon barrels over to Ireland, Irish distillers, after they put the whiskey into the barrels, after the whiskey was drunk, they decided that they would put cider into the wooden barrels, because the people of Cork, they're very resourceful. Tashil Anna Heftuilout. And but of course, what they never reckoned on was the whiskey at that point having enmeshed itself, that was in with the wood, mixes with the cider, increased the concentration of the cider, and it became known in Cork as Johnny Jump Up. So if you ordered a cider, it was known back in those days as a Johnny Jump Up, because it absolutely drove you crazy. So this is one man's encounter with the Johnny Jump Up one day in Cork. It'll go something like this. I'll tell you a story that happened to me. One day as I went down to Yall by the sea, the sun it was warm and the wind it was high. Says I a quite pint wouldn't do any harm. I went in and I called for a bottle of stout. Says the barman, I'm sorry, all the beer is sold out. Dry whiskey or Paddy, 10 years in the war. Says I'll try cider, I've heard that is good. Oh never again, if I live to 100 or 110. For I fell to the ground and I couldn't get up. After drinking the quart of the gin, jump out. After drinking the third, I went straight to the yard, where I bumped into Brophy, the big civic guard. Come here to me, boy, don't you know I'm the law? I up with me fist and I shattered his jaw when he fell to the ground with his knees doubled up. But it wasn't I hit him, 'twas Johnny Jumpo. The next thing I met down in Yall by the sea was a person on crutches, and says he to me, I'm afraid of my life, I'll get you. Would you help me across to the railwayman's bar? After drinking a quart of that cider so sweet, he threw down his crutches and danced on his feet. I went up the Lee Road a friend for to see, and they call it the madhouse in Cork by the Lee. But when I got up there, the truth I do tell, they had the poor bugger locked up in his cell. Said the guard testing him, say these words if you can. Around the rugged rock, the ragged rascal ran. Tell them I'm not crazy, tell them I'm not mad. It was only a sup of the bottle I had. Well, the man died in the Union by the name of McNabb. They washed him and they laid him outside on a slab. And after O'Connor his measurements to take, well, his wife took him on to a bloody I wake about 12 o'clock and the beer it was high, and the corpsey jumped up, and says he with a sigh, I can't get to heaven, they won't let me up, till I bring them a quart of the Gianni. Jump up on never again, if I live to 100 or 110. For I fell to the ground and I couldn't get up, drinking a quart of the Gianni. Jump up. Johnny, jump up. Sinead.
You.
Fair play, buddy.
Good man. Who wrote that song, Paddy? Do you know?
Oh, I had his
before
name.
Jimmy
I can't
McCarthy.
forget off the top of my head. I don't think it was. No, I don't think so.
Just long before Jimmy McCarthy, I'd say.
Yeah.
Great old tune.
So
Youghal by
very good tune, Paddy.
Youghal by the sea. My father lives in Youghal, so nice reference.
Oh yes, is that right? Youghal,
Yeah.
Do you know
He
how
lives
it got
down in
its
Youghal.
name? Do you know how Youghal got its name?
I don't.
It goes back to Sir Walter Raleigh. Actually, he was the guy who, of course, introduced Youghal, and one of the people that worked for him. He was banished from the town of Youghal, and apparently they put him on a boat, and he was going out off the boat. He looked back and he said, "Well, F Youghal." Just kidding.
That's a fact.
That's a true story. And of course,
Good
Youghal.
after a drop of whiskey, you know.
Youghal is in East Cork, and a few miles to the west of Youghal, you'll find the town of Middleton, home of Irish distillers, and Middleton being that middle town between Youghal and Cork City. Halfway between Youghal and Cork is Middleton, the middle town between the two. That Stram Good says Jimmy Crowley wrote it. Did Jimmy Crowley write that, or was it before Jimmy Crowley?
No, I don't think he did. No, I don't think he did.
No. Before his time. Ladies and gentlemen, give Paddy a round of applause in the comments, please. He's lighting it up from Chicago. I can feel the vibrations in San Diego from that Bowron, from how tight that skin on that drum is. Fair play to you. Give him a round of applause. You'll be back to us for another few tunes, and I see loads of requests in there, and I'm delighted to see that there's great Cork representation, or I might call them my lock-in loyalists who are representing Cork, looking for all kinds of things, from the Contender to the Holy Ground to the banks of my lovely Lee. So great old tunes being requested.
No problem. Well, we look forward to sharing them afterwards. We look forward to the next drop in.
You work on that hip flask behind the scenes, and we'll come back to you for the next old tune.
Love it. What a man.
It's only a shame we're not all in the same room and just having the crack, drinking the whiskey, listening to the tunes. You know, that'd be a real lock-in.
Yeah. I've had many a lock-in in Chicago, more in Ireland, but Paddy, having someone with a talent like that is just, you need it, don't you? It's
you really do. You need
amazing.
A character.
Yeah. Yeah, and someone with just a repertoire of songs and poems that Paddy can do is extremely impressive.
That's it. I mean, you wouldn't get it from any other county, only from Cork, so we should acknowledge that. No, you wouldn't. I mean, if we brought on a Dublin musician, we'd have an awful night altogether tonight. I
was just about to say, we should see any Dublin comments in the chat box.
Well, here's one from Richard saying, "Inside me is a dub trying to get out." Richard, I hope he gets out fast.
Yeah, get out there, Richard, quick.
And runs away. I don't want him. All right. Let me see. We're 2 whiskeys in. I think it's time to move on to the most recent release from the Kilbegan Distillery. What are we drinking next, Michael?
Yeah, so we're going to move on to, where's my glass? Kilbegan Single Pot Still.
Woo!
Have you tried this? You had it last week.
I had a small sip last week, but you'll forgive me if I don't have a tasting notes compiled on it, because it was after 2.5 hours of a lock-in, 8 or 9 samples in. I thought I'll be sneaky now and I'll get a head start on the Kilbegan night.
That's absolutely fine. What did you think?
Well, I only had a small little dribble, as you can see. I just took the little bit out of the neck. And I said, I'll wait, because I was in no place to properly appreciate it.
I love, before we dive into the tasting notes and the story behind single pot still, if you have your rye glass in front of you, just a little nose comparison between the two. There's just such an obvious difference. The spiciness in the rye shines in small batch rye. But the mash bill in Kilbegan single pot still barley is very unique, and again it harkens back to the 1800s in the distillery when oats were used. For passed down through generations of distillers, a rule of thumb really that oats were used for filtration purposes, but also added a lot of flavor to the finished product, to the whiskey itself. Right. I'm trying to read all these comments coming in.
Don't you worry about them; they'll only throw you.
So this whiskey right here is Barry, 100% a pot still Irish whiskey. So granted, in late 2017 when we launched Kilbegan small batch rye, we weren't allowed to call it a pot still, even though it tastes made exactly like a pot still. And thankfully, the crew at the distillery that laid this down in 2010, once the distillery got back up and running again, made a mash bill that complies with the current technical file, which is great. Right. So this is made up of malted barley and unmalted barley. And we can chat about pot still Irish whiskey as a category itself, because it is synonymous with the Irish whiskey industry. It is the traditional Irish whiskey, if you like. But the difference with this here is that it's 2.5% oats. So there's Irish oats in this whiskey right here, which side by side with the rye, I think the spiciness of the rye is a bit more evident. But when we taste this guy, it's creamy. It's caramel, vanilla, and that's a combination of a couple of things. It's the nuttiness of the malted and unmalted barley. It's the sort of viscous, soft notes off of the oats. Almost like if you were to have porridge and drain the water out of your porridge, you get that sort of sweet, thick, soft vanilla.
So let's talk about the oats a little bit, because oats were a part of distilling, Ireland's distilling heritage. It was a remarkably difficult thing to distill, is my understanding. It creates a very thick, hard to work with, pasty-like mash. It's not been very common in Irish whiskey in the past 50 years, but it's starting to make a little bit of a comeback. And this is I think this was the first, certainly this is the first single pot still in 50 plus years, isn't it? Released with oats as an ingredient.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point there, it's an LTO. So both rye and Kilbegan single pot still are limited time offerings. So when they're gone, they're gone. And that could be for a number of reasons. I mean, the distillery, the capacity at Kilbegan is very small. So these two are 100% made in Kilbegan. And when you guys, or when your guests go, or if they have gone, they'll see how small it is. But also to your point there, oats are difficult to work with. They're like, and I always use the analogy of making porridge or making oatmeal. If you have a pot of oatmeal on the stove, it's going to get gloopy and burn at the bottom and crusty. And thick, very, very thick, and that's difficult to work with. And true, but also it always provided a bit of filtration, but also a lot more flavor as well. And
do we know why historically, Michael, oats would have been used? Was it that barley was oats more widely available than barley, or why was it used historically?
Barley was obviously available. Barley was quite expensive. Oats, especially in the Midlands, were available. So I suppose back, and none of us actually know because we weren't around in the mid to late 1800s, but it was any grain you could get your hands on to distill. And after the malt tax was introduced, it was a mixture of malted barley, unmalted barley, and sometimes a third grain. So it was, how do we fill up that mash bill with a third grain? And oats were used, rye were used, and a myriad of other grains as well. But yeah, oats are readily available as well. And obviously, as we know, grown and quite affordable in Ireland too.
I have not tried this yet.
Yeah.
I have never had an Irish whiskey with oats in my life.
Well, if you have a water,
if I keel over, if I fall off the chair, I didn't like it.
You won't fall off, I promise you. If you have a water, take a sip of water.
Right.
And get try and clean your palate of the rye, because it is a similar mash bill in the sense of the malted and unmalted barley content.
Right.
But the rye is pretty overpowering in the small batch rye. Rye is very flavorful.
So I poured a drop of rye back into the glass just for a little comparison on the nose. And if I was to, my first reaction now comparing the two is that the rye to me seems more, if I dare say, ethanol kind of spirit driven, whereas on the nose the single pot still seems a little bit more subdued on the nose than the rye does.
Softer, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
You know what I get here, and I've gotten it before comparing the two. My dad, I grew up Dad worked in the food ingredient industry, so a lot of spices, and we forever grew up at home, the 5 kids, around spices in the house. And this reminds me of the warehouse or the spice. Dad's car used to always smell of food ingredients and spices, and this is it. It's completely different to the pot still with the oats.
I saw a friend of mine. She visited a farm in Ireland recently, and she took a picture of a sign. It was a farm that was open to kids and tourists to come in and understand the working farm. And they had a little description of oats, and they had this quote from an old book. And I think it was an Englishman had gone to Scotland, and he had discovered that the Scotsmen were eating oats, whereas in England they were feeding oats to the horses. And this man retorted to the Scot how he noticed this was the case. And the Scotsman said, yes, that's why in England you have strong horses, and in Scotland we have strong men. And so I think the oats are clearly a good constitutional addition to our diet.
He's a very quick man. Yeah. But hey, I don't know about you, but I grew up having oatmeal for breakfast every morning.
I had Rice Krispies. You were a more traditional house. I was sugar driven. They were taking care of you. They didn't care much about me.
You were fancier. Rice Krispies.
Very fancy.
So we'll have a taste of this, will we?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So here we go.
You got a toast for us?
We'll try one more. Health and a long life to you. Partner of your choice to you. A life without rent to you. And may you be in heaven a half an hour before the devil knows you're gone. Sláinte.
Sláinte.
For me, Barry, it's completely different, night and day almost to the small batch rye. It's very soft. Here it's almost as Paddy described the plop of whiskey. You get that plop of spiciness on your palate with the rye. Here it's soft, and it almost gets spicier as you leave it linger. So now I'm feeling the spiciness, or the nutty notes, if you like. But it's soft, it's creamy, a lot of vanilla, a lot of cinnamon notes or nutmeg almost that I get from single pot still. But the oats make it extremely soft and delicate.
It's coating my mouth like none of the others.
Yeah.
It's sticking to my teeth in that quintessential pot still way, but heavy. Is that the oat component? Is that contributing to the viscosity, the weight of it?
Yeah, absolutely.
In any way.
And that's it. That's what when you go back, if you're in Kilbegan, you see the descriptors or the recipes from the 1800s. That's what's described. It's the thickness, the viscosity, the flavor that's provided from the oats. They're not just useful in the distillation process. They provide a lot of flavor for the end product. And you can almost imagine it before you try it. I mean, we all know what oatmeal tastes like. We all know what the sugary liquid, the residue of oatmeal tastes like as well.
It's got a longer finish to the rye.
Yeah.
How long is this matured for, Michael?
This is about 8 years old. So
About
again,
8 years.
like rye, laid down in 2010, some of the first liquid that we laid down, and then released in 17 or I should say 18 and 19. So about 8.5 years.
All bourbon barrels?
All bourbon barrels, bottled at 43%.
Is that a hallmark of Kilbegan, that it's bourbon barrel only, or do you use any ex-wine barrels at all, fortified wine at all in any of the products?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our 15-year-old has fortified wine cask finishes. And then Cooley, whether it's the Kilbegan brand name or any of our other products, have fortified wine cask finishes. And I mean, there's a lot of casks maturing at the distillery right now, and I think our industry is granted it's quite old, and we often talk about the history of Irish whiskey, but the industry as we know it today is quite young, and a lot of distilleries are releasing younger liquid, 4, 5, 6 years old. Kilbegan Distillery has a lot of that, but it also has more 8-year-old, 9-year-old liquid that they are finishing in different various wine casks as well. So there's a lot of innovation in that small distillery too.
Do you see the similarities at all? Can you get the similarities between the small batch rye and the single pot still on your palate at all, or do you see them as completely different whiskies to you?
I do. I do get it for sure. And if this makes sense, I think the finishes on both are different. Once they hit my palate, I get the nuttiness. The finishes on this pot still is long, but it's creamy, whereas this is long and spicy. I mean, at the tip of my tongue, 30 seconds after tasting this, I'm still getting that lingering spice, which is not present for me anyway. Which is not present in the pot still, and that has to be down to the oats and the rye.
Is it an equal quantity of malted and unmalted barley in this, or
in this? No.
Do we talk about that? Trade secrets?
Trade secrets. No, it's not. It's so it's 2.5% oats, and then it's majority malted barley, smaller amount unmalted barley.
Okay. This is the heaviest, and I don't mean this in a bad way in any case. It is a whiskey that has demonstrated its presence in my mouth more than any of the other two tonight. There's a weight to it, and since I first got interested in Irish whiskey, I listened to the expert brand ambassadors who have been remarkably generous with their time and their insights. People like John Cashman and Ger Garland and people from all over Ireland who talk about this creamy pot still and creaminess and a spice and a viscosity. I have to say that this is the first time I've truly felt it.
Yeah.
Like that this is, I feel it more, put it that way. I feel it more in this than I have in any of the other pot stills, because it doesn't seem like it's in any way overtaken by any wine finish or cask finish. The characteristic of the distillate is there. Yeah,
I completely agree. It is what it is almost, and it's the mash bill is there, and then it's 8 years in a bourbon barrel, and when you look at the tasting notes that we have on our sell sheets or any sort of brochures that we hand out, you can get them. And a lot of times tasting notes are, for me, and again, I think you might agree after what you just said, they're difficult to get, maybe difficult to comprehend sometimes. But for this, it's you taste it exactly as it's written on the paper.
I think I'm very early on in my journey of flavor identification. Like it's listening to people who have experience like yourself, who share a note. And I say this, I think almost every week I talk about how I'm relying on those who have a more mature palate to say, hey, have you noticed the pear, or have you noticed the caramel? And then when I look for it, I find it. But I feel like up until now, I've had a remarkably plain palate. Like I haven't experienced enough foods, or I haven't been brave enough. I've had a remarkably unadventurous pursuit of food, which now is showing in my ability to identify the different flavor notes. But now that I know that, I'm starting to become more adventurous to figure out, but I have to know what a prickly pear tastes like in order to identify it in a whiskey.
Yeah, I agree. And me too. And that can only come with time, I'm sure. And to be honest with you, we always attend these, or we have attended these events like Whiskey Fest, Whiskey Live, and Whiskey in the Winter, etc. And they're probably not the best places to expand your palate and explore different flavor avenues, because it's always amazing to me that you have people coming in and they're telling you at your booth that, hey, I taste this random descriptive word. And you're like, well, you were just over at our Lefroy stand tasting the peatiest whiskey that we have. So obviously you're still getting it I'm sure, and I don't know the answer, but I'm sure that just takes time to properly. It just
takes time.
Yeah.
I asked last week on the live stream, you mentioned earlier, you referenced earlier, we had David Mara, whiskey fan and cask strength crusader on, and he's a great man for tasting and has been a great knowledge and a great man for the insights. And he just shared how it's just about trying more foods, thinking about what you're eating, and identifying the flavor that you're getting. And whatever you're getting is what you're getting. Now, commit that to memory. And he had a great point about trying to chew your whiskey to trick your mind into thinking you're eating again, so that it can recall those things that it previously ate. And I thought that was a great little bit of insight into how to taste whiskey, because if I go back to my first Whiskey Live in 2018, just like you said, I remember going to the booths, and I remember John Cashman, if you're still there, I think you may have poured me at the tiniest drop of small batch rye that day, and I couldn't get what other people were getting. And it was just because my palate was not ready. And so it takes time. So for those of you who are new to whiskey, don't be discouraged. Everyone's on a journey, and it's going to be another 20 years before I'm able to, if at all, able to replicate or identify some of the notes that people like John Cashman and Michael Egan and experts in the field have. So stick with it, which isn't a bad thing.
Yeah, and you don't need to include me in that bracket either, because I'm still learning. I often tell a story, and if John is watching, back in 2013 or 2012, we were one of the first group of IBEC ambassadors to come out with Beam and represent Kilbegan in the States, which was such an amazing gig to get. And we were excited, scared, and just unsure of the whole, or uneducated really on the whole industry, because back in 2012, the industry was quite small and consolidated. So we were down in John Teeling's office in the Clontarf Road, and John Cashman led our whole training, and he set up a sommelier, and I'm sure he's listening now and he'll laugh, but he had a sommelier come in and teach us about flavor profiles and everything. And we were tasting red wine or whatever it was, and she was asking us what we're getting. And I was saying, grapes, and she's like, no. And John said something so out there, like, it tastes like a Sunday morning when the dew on the grass is evaporating and you might get a sniff of the grass. And she's like, I get that. Yeah. Like, how do you not get grapes?
Did you feel like packing up your bags at the time and saying, no, this isn't for me?
Well, I lived around the corner, so I was like, if I do pack up, I'm home in 5 minutes. But now I might be that guy who's saying it to these mad descriptors that you mightn't understand or you mightn't get. And I look forward to learning more, to be honest.
It's I sometimes laugh out loud at the simplicity of a note that has evaded me for the number of years that I'm only a few years back into Irish whiskey, or really getting into Irish whiskey, but simple things like what I was saying historically might have been, well, it seems like nail varnish on the nose. And then somebody said to me, you mean pear? And I said, yes, pear. It's pear. Of course it's pear. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, it's there are. And then, you know what? We see some brand books and some brochures that have these crazy flavor profiles and tasting notes in them that we have to be like, guys, we can't ask people to expect to taste that, you know. The fumes
of an outboard motor, outboard engine of a small motorboat on a lake. Yeah.
And I might like the fumes of an outboard motor engine on the lake, but it mightn't taste like that to me, you know. So it's if you like it, you like it, and that's
isn't that it?
Most important.
That's it. I think there's a hierarchy of enjoyment with whiskey, and I'm always keen to bring it back to the very highest level of that hierarchy, which is, do you like it?
Yeah.
And then we'll go deeper. Okay, now why do you like it? And
Yeah.
I'm asking that of myself. Why do I like it? And I have to really dig deep to find that out. And if I do like it, okay, I'll explain why and then go further down into the notes. But I think we lose track sometimes of enjoyment, or there's the danger of being too academic with whiskey when I'm more of a romantic than an academic. So if you start talking to me about water wheels from the 1800s and whiskey, I love that whiskey far more than if you talk to me about parts per million of this or that, and you'll have me at the romance of it. But I suppose it's about having all that information so that people can take what they want from it
100%
to enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, a beautiful drop of whiskey, regardless of the night, is our Kilbegan single grain on the rocks, and I just like it. I like how the ice cubes might dilute the whiskey, and I like the high corn content in the whiskey itself, and I just like how it tastes. And if I go into a bar and it has some of our older expressions, sometimes I might just get a single grain on the rocks. And it's as our old Canadian ambassador Dan Tulio used to say, drink what you like and more importantly, like what you drink.
That's it.
So that's something that I always go by.
It's interesting, the people weighing in on the conversation regarding tasting. We have Dahi O'Connell, who was on the podcast this week, whiskey man himself, talking about pear nails, and Eric talking about it tastes like schnozberry. Steve saying now that his Kilbegan pot still has been in the glass for a few minutes, he's getting fresh cooked pasta on the nose. And
lovely.
It's hard to argue with what people get, isn't it? Is somebody ever wrong in what they're getting on the nose or the palate? Like, is there some point where you'd say, no, go out of that?
No, like, who are we to say no? You know, it has so many, like, what did you have for dinner? You know, what did you drink before? There's so many variants that come into it that might have an impact on the flavor notes or profile that you get from a whiskey. And just because I work for the brand doesn't mean my descriptors are right, you know? So again, it always goes back to, for me anyway, it always goes back to, do you like it? And that's the most important thing.
That's it. That's the most important thing.
Whether you get whatever, the vanilla cinnamon notes, or you get blueberries from something, do you like it or not? And
100%.
And that's it.
We're going to go back to Paddy in a moment, who has been very busy removing the contents of his hip flask and putting it in a far better receptacle. But before we do that, I want to put up another trivia question, because we have many surprises and delights for our audience. And we have many great whiskey fans and Irish fans and great friends of both Irish whiskey and Kilbegan here tonight. So we're going to put up another question that I'd love you to answer in the comments. And we will be choosing some folks to surprise from these answers. So what does the word single refer to when on the label of Irish whiskey? So we are drinking right now our third whiskey of the evening, which is the single pot still Irish whiskey from Kilbegan, their most recent release, 100% distilled and matured in the Kilbegan distillery. But what does the word single refer to when on the label of Irish whiskey? And it can be a confusing description when we hear single pot still or single malt, but the word single has a very clear definition. And for those of you who'd like to answer that, you never know. You may end up getting surprised with some fantastic Kilbegan hats or glasses or socks or pins or any number of things. So feel free to weigh in the comment section, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube or Periscope. We'd love to get your answers to that. Before we move on to Paddy for an old tune, he's warming up there. He's been getting his bower on ready. If you are enjoying the show tonight, let us know in the comments. Tell us what you're enjoying about either the great content that's being shared or the whiskey that's being shared or any other thing that you're enjoying. Let us know what you're enjoying. And as always, we always appreciate a share to your network. be it a share on your Facebook profile or to a Facebook group or a page that you're part of, because after all, the more people that can join into our lock-in on a Friday night means the more people we can convert to Irish whiskey, the more people that will take bourbon and scotch off their shelves and throw it down the drain to make space for the glory that is Irish whiskey. And maybe most importantly of all, the lock-in is about one thing. It's about community. It's about coming together. The names that show up in the comments on a Friday night are friends to me at this stage, because you've been turning up here every Friday night and we've got to know each other. We've become friends online. We've had chats through Messenger and conversations on the phone, and they've all started as a result of this little bit of community on a Friday night. And look, let's be honest. I don't know a time when we have felt perhaps more fragmented as a world and more distant and more isolated. And perhaps now is the time to be seeking out the community. And we provide it here on a Friday night. And I hope you'd agree at a very low cost. It's a great chance to come in and have a few drinks and meet like-minded people. So, Michael, do you think it's time for another old tune?
Absolutely. Yeah. Paddy's still around. 100%.
He's not going away.
They're still there, Paddy. There's no whiskey in those two bottles, is there?
They're going down. They're going down.
What are you going to sing for us now?
After all that whiskey, I suppose we better go whiskey. So I want to, I'm sure you'll all tap along to this, and I want to dedicate this, if you don't mind, to my sister Margaret O'Leary, who's looking in down in Dingle there at the moment. She texted me, and she's down there out in Dingle, and battered by the wind and all that, but she's looking in there tonight. So fair play, Margaret. And of course, her husband, my brother-in-law Dan, is catching all my salmon on my rod, and I'm out here in Chicago. Fecker. So, okay, so here we go. As I was going over the Cork and Kerry mountains, I met with Captain Farrell and his money he was counting. I first produced my pistol and then produced me rapier, saying, stand and the level far you are of all this sea were mushering on the da. Whack ball the daddy-o, whack ball the daddy-o, there's whiskey in the jar. He counted out his money and it made a pretty penny. I put it in my pocket and I took it home to Jenny. She smiled and she swore that she never would deceive me. But the devil take them women, for they never can be easy. Mushering on the dude on the dial. Whack ball the daddy-o, whack ball the daddy-o, there's whiskey in the jar. 'Twas early in the morning, just before I rose to travel. Up on the band of footmen, and likewise Captain Farrell. But Jenny drew me bridges, and she filled them up with water, and sent for Captain Farrell to be ready for the slaughter. Mushering on the dude on the dial. Whack ball the daddy-o, whack ball the daddy-o, there's whiskey in the jar. Now some take the life in the carriages a-rolling, and others take the life in the hurling and the bowling. But I take the life in the juice of the barley, and porking pretty fair maids bright and early in the morning. Mushering on the dude on the dial. Whack ball the daddy-o, whack ball the daddy-o, there's whiskey in the jar. And if anyone can aid me, 'tis my brother in the army. If I can find his station in Cork or in Killarney, and if he'd go with me, we'd go roving in Kilkenny. And I'm sure he'd treat me better than the darling sporting Jenny. Mushering on the dude on the dial. Whack ball the daddy-o, whack ball the daddy-o, there's whiskey in the jar. As I was going over the Cork and Kerry mountains, I met with Captain Farrell and his money he was counting. I first produced my pistol and then produced me rapier, saying, stand and deliver, for you are of all deceiver. Mushering on the dude on the dial. Whack Paul the Daddy-O, like Paul the Daddy-O, there's whiskey in the jar, mushering on the dude on the dove. Like Paul the Daddy-O, like Paul the Daddy-O, there's a whiskey in the jar.
Oh, you!
Fair play, Paddy.
Jeez, Paddy, you know, like I'd love to see you when you're really on fire. Like.
we
unreal.
Barry, we had a fundraiser. I mentioned to you last week. We had a fundraiser, Paddy. I don't know if you remember, for the GA club back in Dublin last year, 2 years ago now.
Oh yes, I do. Yeah.
And we had a savage night. A lot of fun, for a great cause, and we ended up in the Kerryman. Friends of ours own a bar downtown in Chicago.
I know it well.
And a sing-song got going, and my dad was there, Paddy, so inevitably a sing-song got going. And Paddy didn't have a bower on, Barry, but he had a menu. And he picked up a menu, and he had you'd swear he had a bower on in his hand.
Sausage and mashers.
The menu was broken to bits, but it served its purpose.
You got your music. Paddy, great response to the old tunes coming in from across the United States. And I mean, like, I've got
anyone who's going to be watching, if I may say, we have I've been working on this project for the last couple of years, and where we just recorded it last month. It's a one-man show documenting Ireland's road to independence from 1798 to 1916. It's called the I Am Ireland Show, and it'll be coming out on Channel 11 PBS here in November for Thanksgiving, and then it'll be coming out across the US on PBS next March as a special pandemic version, actually, you know. So we're doing that with the City Lights Orchestra, and you'll hear a lot of the great Irish rebel songs. And you know, when you'll be able to sit back and maybe have a glass of whiskey, Kilbegan, hopefully, but just sit back and hear. We talk about journey, and you think about the evolution of whiskey, and think about the evolution of songs, you know, and you'll get to hear a lot of that. So more to follow on that.
Paddy, how long have you been in the United States?
I've been here now 14 years. Yep. I haven't kicked me out yet, so that's pretty good.
Is it that they just haven't found you, or?
I'm in disguise, you know. I'm in disguise.
You clearly you're being 100% yourself, in the sense of you're singing the songs that are authentic to your own heritage and background. Are there songs, or is there a particular song that evokes Ireland to you more than others?
Yeah, that's a good question. There probably would be a few, all right. It kind of depends. Yeah, it kind of depends on the day, I suppose, and the mood that you're in, you know. But I suppose I grew up in a very working class area, and certainly grew up around a lot of rebel songs, you know, and the passion that emanates from that. And you know, when you look back to Michael Collins, of course, when he wrote a lot of great articles around how did we get here, and you know, he talked about the evolution of the bard from the 12th century right up to probably around 1798, when he said a new type of bard came about that sung great songs of hope. They sang songs to inspire and songs of rebellion. And he goes on to say that the Irish people keep these songs alive because they represent our people's own powerful emotions and desires. And when you add in, you know, the lock-in at the end of the night and a drop of whiskey, and you probably would have all seen this, and guys get out there and they sing as if they're on the hurling field or the football pitch, and they're giving it holly, you know, and
giving it holly.
But there's such a beautiful, how would I put it? I suppose that it's these songs that are knitted together right down through the centuries that tell their own stories. And I suppose it's very interesting just hearing about the evolution of the whiskey that Mike was on about, and just seeing the sense of journey that comes about that. So we're just happy to sing those songs, and I suppose be the messengers throughout all of this, you know.
Paddy, would you have been as connected to that side of Irish heritage as a Corkman living in Ireland, or did the American residency bring that out in you?
I know I probably was always connected with in Ireland, but in a different way, you know, probably out fishing on the banks of the River Lee, or, you know, just maybe thinking about things, you know, and spent quite a bit of time, you know, I come from the city, but maybe spending a lot of time in the country. But it's when you come out from America, to be honest with you, and you look back, and you just see Ireland in a different way. And, you know, I must say, America is a fabulous place. If you have an idea, you can run with it here. And people will, you know, support you and scaffold you. And, you know, even just look at this community, and great to see Michael doing so well, and Kilbegan. We're all here to support each other. That spirit of Irish America is very much alive, you know. So, yeah.
Michael, when you first came over to the United States, was it a shock to the system in terms of a way of life, a different approach to community? Like, was there anything that shocked you particularly, or was something different than that which you were most used to in Ireland?
Well, so actually, I'm an American citizen, Barry. So I have, my mom is from Chicago, believe it or not, and has lived in Dublin for the majority of her life. And so we used to holiday here as kids coming over. So it was a familiar setting for me, but I only came over, to be honest with you, for 18 months, and on this journey of on the program I got on, and I fell in love with the Irish whiskey industry. I fell in love with the States, and it is, to Paddy's point, a great country, and there's opportunities every single day, but it's a vastly different setup than we had in Ireland growing up, for sure.
As an Irishman with two passports, then, Michael, so you've got the American passport and the Irish passport.
Yeah.
I've applied for full citizenship. I'm a permanent resident of the United States. I'm married to an American girl. I've taken my time, sadly, in applying for full citizenship, and hopefully that all comes through. But I'm very curious to talk to people who have become citizens and to understand the emotional shift that perhaps comes with now having a foot in two countries. And Michael, have you felt that at all, or have you compartmentalized either country in a way that allows you to do what you need to do and keep them separate when needed?
Yeah, it's funny. Well, keep them separate when needed. Yeah, when I'm traveling back and forth, it's the two passports come into to full use, for sure. But yeah, it's funny because I've never felt like I've moved away from home. You know, there's always that connection to Ireland, and I still feel like I will eventually go back to Ireland, for sure. That's what I want to do. But yeah, it's always been it's been a lot easier moving over here when you have the ease of travel back and forth, for sure.
Right.
And it's only when we have a lot of ambassadors here in the States, and I'm working with the visa companies to sort out visas and trying to figure out who can stay, if we can have ambassadors stay, and how we sort out that visa process as well, which I'm totally unfamiliar to, because I don't have to go down that road, thankfully.
Right.
But I feel for a lot of fellow Irishmen and women in the States who unfortunately are hit with harder situations than I've been hit because of visa constraints.
When I first came over to the United States in 2007, I remember very well-meaning people insisting that they introduced me to the Irish pubs in the Midwest, in Ohio, where I moved originally. And I don't know why, but my first reaction was, no, I just come from Ireland. Show me American bars. Help me understand what's special about what you have to offer, because I'm very clear on what the Irish pubs have to offer. Paddy, did you have a challenge in transitioning from Paddy the Irishman to now Paddy the American?
Well, I usually go from one pub to another, I'm just kidding. No. It's interesting. I work in healthcare as well. And so, yeah, you definitely have to, step out beyond the traditional Irish community and embrace that type of, American culture, find yourself, and you can still, come back to your own groundedness in Irish. I hope that kind of makes sense, I work for a faith-based healthcare community, and it's interesting that you mentioned that. I was at one of our chapels once, and I was dressed. My former company, they were Lutherans, and I would be dressed up in the blue blazer and the blue shirt and the purple tie and all that, And I was in the chapel once, and I was talking to this person, and they said, "Oh my God, I never realized there were so many Lutherans in Ireland." And of course I said, "Oh, absolutely. And we're making a comeback." But you have to be ready to, but, I would say that for me, embracing the culture here, there's such a great sense of Irish community. And, for anyone looking in Ireland and that and thinking about America, there's so much to offer out around here, and we have a fabulous community, and I'm sure, speak for you as well, Barry, in San Diego, in terms of cultists and all that is out around there, But Ireland is really like the extra, maybe like the 51st state, if that's the right way to put it. There's so much travel back and forth, and long may that continue. There's we have a great grasp of the Irish, the English language, which does help, even though our own Irish language is our distinct identity, But no, this is a good place.
Have you another tune for us?
Oh, I'd love it. Yeah.
We're only getting started, Barry.
In Chicago.
We're getting warmed up.
In the city of Chicago, as the evening shadows fall, there are people dreaming of the hills of Donegal. 1847 was the year it all began. Deadly pains of hunger drove a million from the land. They journeyed not for glory, their motive was in greed. A voyage of survival across the stormy sea to the city of Chicago. As the evening shadows fall, there are people dreaming of the hills of Donegal. Some of them knew fortune, and some of them knew fame. More of them knew hardship, and died upon the plain. They spread throughout the nation, they rolled the railroad cars, brought their songs and music to ease their lonely heart. To the city of Chicago, as the evening shadows fall, there are people dreaming of the hills of Donegal. To the city of Chicago, as the evening shadows fall, there are people dreaming of the hills of Donegal, of the hills of Oran Park, of the plains of San Diego, far away in Dingletown, dreaming of the Lock-in, supping away Kilbegan whiskey to the city of Chicago. We are here on a Friday night, drinking our old Kilbegan whiskey, having the crack like the Irish might.
You
Paddy.
good
Deadly.
man, Paddy.
Love it.
Christy Moore, who?
Love it.
Unreal. Give Paddy a round of applause, please, in the comments. That is it's a haunting, beautiful song that never fails to raise the hairs on the back of my neck, thinking about the bit of Ireland that we might dream of when times are tough. And wouldn't it be nice to be back there? And I don't know if I speak for either of you, but I will say that over the past few weeks, as Ireland has been locked down and people have had their staycations and holidayed around Ireland, I've seen some beautiful photographs and videos of the Ireland that we know and love, Dingle and the Slay Head and the Dingle Peninsula and beautiful places in Cork. And I'll tell you what, I miss that. I miss that now. Yeah.
Big time. And it's only, to be honest,
Well, you would, but it's always in your heart, you know? Always in your heart.
Yeah, I've had a number of friends who have had trips cancelled abroad. Ryanair, affordable flights to inexpensive flights to places like Spain or etc., and who have gone to Dingle, who have gone down to Kerry, Cork, Galway, up to Donegal, and there's a lot of people in Ireland just experiencing now how beautiful our country is, and how beautiful, which will definitely bode well for when, if you want to link it to the Irish whiskey industry, for when our visitor centres open up again. And hopefully there's now a re-energized group of tourists in Ireland who are enjoying staycations.
I agree with that 100%. I'll ask you this question, Michael, but before I do, I'll pose it to Paddy. Paddy, do you think there's one song for you that represents Cork?
Barry, does a hungry dog eat tripe? It would have to be the banks of my own lovely Lee, for God's sake.
So here's my ask of you. I'm going to ask you to give me a verse of the Banks, and then Michael, whether you're ready or not, you're going to have to find your Dublin song, and you're going to give us a verse of your Dublin song. But we'll start with Paddy.
And what are you doing, Barry?
I'll find a Cork song that I'll do as well.
The L Triangle.
That's a Dublin song.
And now, Barry, I'm sure I speak for you as well, but here in Chicago, we have the Chicago Cork Association, and I'm the secretary of it. And of course, as Michael mentioned earlier about having 2 passports, we can say that we'll have 3 passports. We have the Irish, we have the American, and of course we have the Cork passport, which is very, very important, you know. Oh, how to my thoughts in their fancy take flight to the home of my childhood away, to the days when each patriot's vision seemed bright, ere I dreamed that those joys would decay. When my heart was as wide as the wild winds that flowed down the Mardyke through each elm tree. Here we go now. Where we sported and played beneath the green leafy shade on the banks of my own lovely Lee. Where we sported and played beneath the green leafy shade on the banks of my own lovely Lee. Up the rebels!
Hey! Paddy, that's your song right there. Your voice is perfect.
Barry, I've had the good fortune of seeing Paddy a number of times singing in bars, in venues, at functions, and regardless of the song, it's the same passion. And I love that, Paddy. So keep it up. It's a joy. It's a joy to be around.
The crowd is going wild, Paddy. That is a beautiful. There's a beautiful timbre to the way you sang that. A finer rendition I haven't heard in quite a while.
Tis the Kilbegan.
So now, Michael, tis over to you.
We close it up there, will we?
Is that it? We'll close
Good luck, lads.
I must say, I heard Michael before. Michael does a great job of the Rocky Road to Dublin.
Oh.
I do a job of the Rocky Road to Dublin, Paddy. I don't know if it's a great job.
You do a great job. I want to put you on the spot now. It's not after the Dublin man we put on the spot, but you know.
I'll try it.
What are you going to give us, Michael? What are you going to do for us?
I'll do the Rocky Road. But I was planning on, Barry asked for a Dublin song, and Paddy, I know you've heard my dad sing "The Maid of Cabra West," which is a
oh yes, yeah,
hopefully an appropriate song, but we'll do the Rocky Road because it has Westmeath, and I see the Westmeath colours on the Kilbegan in front of you there, Barry. In the merry month of June, from me home I started, left the girls in tune, so nearly broken, had saluted father dear, kissed me darling mother, I drank a pint of beer, me grief and tears, it's smothered enough to reap the corn, labour I was born, cut the stout black thorn to banish ghosts, and got me brand new pair of brogues, rattling o'er the bogs, frightened all the dogs over the Rocky Road, to Dublin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, hunt the hare and turn her down the Rocky Road and all the ways to Dublin, whack da. In Mullingar that night I rested, whim so weary, started by daylight, next morning bright and airy, took a drop of the pure, kept me heart from thinking, that's the Paddy's pure, whenever he's on for drinking, to see the lassie smile, laughing all the while, at me curious style to set your heart a bubble, and asked me was I hired, wages I required, till I was nearly tired, over the Rocky Road to Dublin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, hunt the hare and turn her down the Rocky Road and all the ways to Dublin, whack da. From there I got away, me spirits never failing, landed on the quay just as the ship was sailing. Captain at me roared, said there's no room, Paddy. When I jumped aboard, a cabin found for Paddy. Down among the pigs I played some hearty jigs, danced some hearty rigs, the water round me bubbling off the Holyhead. Wish myself was dead, or better far instead, over the Rocky Road to Dublin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, hunt the hare and turn her down the Rocky Road and all the ways to Dublin, whack da. The boys at Liverpool, when we safely landed, call myself a fool. I could no longer stand it, blood began to boil. Temper I was losing, poor old Aaron's Isle. They began abusing the Rami soul, says I shillelagh, I let by. Galway boys whereby they saw I was a hobbling with a loud hooray. Joined in the affray and quickly cleared the way for the Rocky Road to Dublin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hunt the hare and turn her down the Rocky Road and all the ways to Dublin, whack da. Cheers.
Cheers.
Unreal. Give Michael a round of applause there. That was unreal. Fair play to you.
Hello.
Brilliant.
Hello.
I missed the Dublin verse.
Johnny says he'll be singing in the yard soon, his poor neighbours. He's trying to keep up with us. Fair play to you. Unreal. That's great stuff altogether. That gets me off the hook now, because the two of you sang, I don't have to sing anything like.
Go on. Do an old song there, Barry.
All right. I'll give a few verses, so even though it's not a Cork song, I'll do a bit of the Old Triangle.
Oh, beautiful, yeah.
All right. Andrew says it here. He said the bar is much higher tonight. It is, to be fair now, like we're up against professionals tonight, Andrew.
I missed the verse, Andrew.
All right, we'll give a few verses of the Old Triangle. We'll see how we go.
Oh, beautiful, yeah.
Regular guests will be used to this one, but sure, here we go anyway. A hungry feeling came o'er me stealing, and the mice were squealing in my prison cell, and the old triangle went jingle jangle all along the banks of the Royal Canal. To begin the morning, the screw was bawling, get up, you bowsy, and clean out your cell. And the old triangle went jingle, jangle, all along the banks of the Royal Canal. Up in the female prison, there are 75 women. 'Tis among those women I wish I did dwell. And the old triangle went jingle, jangle, all along the banks of the Royal Canal. And the old triangle went jingle, jangle, all along the banks of the Royal Canal. All along the banks of the Royal Canal.
Good man, Barry. Some set of pipes.
Stop.
Some set of
Thought there was
pipes
something
there.
wrong with the audio there.
3 whiskeys, 4 whiskeys, that'll do it.
You know, he's from Cork.
Yeah,
I need some more single pots still after that.
Lovely
love
stuff.
it. Very good.
So let me ask this of the audience. Do you have any requests of our professional singer, not the amateur singers, but the professional singer here tonight? Is there a particular song you might like to hear? Tonight is the chance to get a professional rendition from a legend, the legend that is Paddy Homan from Fairhill in Cork. Brilliant turtlenecking, said James. Yeah, I forgot to let you know, lads, that you had to wear a turtleneck to join tonight.
Yeah. You should get them branded, Barry. You're like Steve Jobs.
I'm working on it. I have T-shirts and caps and all kinds of things. And every day I get a message saying, are there any stories in Sips turtlenecks? And you wouldn't believe how hard it is to get them. Dermot O'Connor asks for an old rendition of Spancil Hill. Paddy, would you have that in you?
Great shout, Dermot.
Yeah, that's a good one. Check out this.
Dermot, this is for you.
Last night as I lay dreaming of pleasant days gone by, me mind and band on rambling, to Ireland I did fly. I stepped on board of the Swan, and I followed with the wind. I mean, next I came to anchor at the cross of Spancil Hill. Being on the 23rd of June, the day before the fair, when Ireland's sons and daughters and people gathered there, the young, the old, the brave, and the bold came their duty to fulfill at the parish church in Clooney, a mile from Spancil Hill. I paid a flying visit to my first and only love. She's as white as any lily and gentle as a dove. She threw her arms around me, saying, Johnny, I love you still. She was a farmer's daughter, the pride of Stansell Hill. I dreamt I held and kissed her as in the days of old. Saying, Johnny, you're only joking, as many as the time before. But the cock it crew in the morning, it crew but loud and shrill. I awoke in California, many miles from Stansell Hill. Last night as I lay dreaming of pleasant days gone by, me mind been bent on rambling, to Ireland I did fly. I stepped on board a vision and I followed with the wind. I'll be mixed, I came to anchor across the Stansell Hill. Oh,
Unreal.
the noble cause.
Unreal. A noble cause. And what's that cause? Is it whiskey or inebriation, or what is that cause?
Well, it's always greatly induced by inebriation, of course, But of course, when you go back to the Noble Call, we've got a group here in Chicago called the Noble Call. But of course, I got that from my parish in Cork, because you know yourself, lads, the end of the night, someone shouts out, Michael, they offer a song, please. And then everyone has to shut up, and shut up there now, Johnny, up for a song, And then there's the calmness around that. And then, there's someone that's organizing the whole session and the lock-in, And that's the Noble Call, the whole tradition of it. But it really kind of speaks more to, not so much everyone having their party piece, but rather that everyone has a shot to be part of, making 3 minutes of a story, which is a song, come alive. Isn't that amazing? And I think, as musicians and singers, and our job is just to, there's some amazing songs when you look into Irish history, and people who wrote these sad songs, and yet here we are singing them 300, 400 years later, and wishing to achieve some sense of immortality. A lot of the times when we're in the bar, whether it's the Galway Arms here in Chicago or back home, we're singing The Rising of the Moon or Kelly of Callan or Bool of Ogue. I've sang at a lot of, quite a few funerals, and they want to hear the Bool of Ogues. They want to hear, the Galtee Mountain Boy. They want to hear these great songs, because even though they're rebel songs, they're actually great prayer.
While Paddy's connection there resets, Paddy, you're absolutely right about that old connection to something of old, something we can hold on to. Michael, I'm curious to get your thoughts on, you've got this wonderful distillery, 1757, the Kilbegan Distillery. We find ourselves now, 250 odd years later.
Yeah.
What is the Kilbegan Distillery in today's terms? Like, it's got this obvious heritage. There are stories we can draw upon from 250 years. How does it bridge the gap between the old and the future?
Yeah, great question. I think we've done the guys at the distillery, I'm fortunate enough to just work with the brands and the whiskies that they make, but they've done a fantastic job at it. And we're one of very, very few distilleries on the island of Ireland that have that legacy and have the blueprints there, if you like, and the footprint on in whatever town it is to actually still produce whiskey. And I think the last two whiskies we've tried, Rye and Pot Still, are just an example of what innovation we can do. And it's innovating in terms of what we know today as innovative Irish whiskey, but it's really replicating historical mash bills. So we have a unique opportunity at Kilbegan to help carve out the future of Irish whiskey by learning from our past. And this is Alexa's reminder here. Alexa's but we have an amazing opportunity to carve out the future, but also learning from what we've done in the past, what our lineage has done in the past at Kilbegan. And there's very few distilleries that can do that. I mean, it would be, I think, a tougher job to start up a new brand or new distillery, I should say, and try and replicate historical mash bills versus what we have. We're so fortunate to have what we have at Kilbegan.
I'd imagine there are trade secrets and things that can't be disclosed, but it's always worth asking. We've seen 2 unique releases from the distillery over the past 2 years. My understanding is that every year there'll be a small batch release from the distillery. Are there things you can or things you can't tell us about what's coming down the pipeline?
Yeah, so there's probably more things I can't tell you. This, you know what, this year has thrown a spanner in the works for everyone. I had 2 trips planned home, one with work, one personal trip to go home and see. So I'd have a much better insight as to what our innovation pipeline looks like had I been back in March at the distillery. But I'm delighted to say that there are, of course, many barrels maturing in the distillery, like different types of casks that we've sourced from Beam, and Kilbegan Liquid. I mean, we're a fully functional distillery once again with an archive of mash bills from the early 20th century, 18th century as well. So there is definitely scope for releasing more LTOs like our Ryan pot still.
Michael, what would you want those who haven't yet tried any Kilbegan whiskey to know about the distillery? If there was one thing you could hone in on and say, this is what sets us apart, or the thing we think is going to connect most with you, what would that be?
Yeah, I mean, and I get asked, I'm sure the team get asked that a lot, and we could go down the avenue of double distillation. We could go down the avenue of what sets us apart in terms of the production process differently. But anyone who has the opportunity to travel to Ireland, I would urge them to. And I mean, there's a rake of distilleries in Dublin that you can now go visit. Some fantastic new old distilleries that you can go visit as well. But I'd urge anyone to go and take that 45, 50-minute trip to Kilbegan, because you're stepping back in time, Barry. You're walking into an 18th century building that is still, the walls are still the same. And here we are today, 263 years later, producing multi-award winning whiskey, which is unbelievable. So you have the oldest distillery, Jack will kill me here, but the oldest, the licensed distillery on the island of Ireland, being recognized as one of the most innovative distilleries and producing the best newcomer whiskies to the category as well. So there's a lot in that I'd love people to explore.
We're 3 Irish men who have found ourselves in America either talking about whiskey or song, and the question that comes to mind for me is, where did it all go wrong for us? But here we are, in any case, in America. And what's obvious to me from listening to Americans' perceptions and thoughts and love and graw for Ireland is, as Roisin sums it up here, magic, romance, stories, history. Ireland, I didn't recognize it enough when I lived there. It took me out of the country to look back in on it, to realize this wonderful rock on the west coast of Europe that has this remarkable history and has punched above its weight in the world, whether that's in exporting people or whiskey or butter or whatever it might be. I think we've done remarkably well as a small country, and that's what I'd love people to get a hold of. And what we have here with Kilbegan is this beautiful intersection of the old and the new, that romance, the highs and lows, the wins, the losses of old, and the resurgence of whiskey interest and Irish whiskey demand today. And long may we have these touchstones with the past, like Kilbegan, that we can visit and we can put our hand on the wall and say 10, 15, 20 generations touch that wall. Yeah. Because if we lose that, what have we left? What have we left at all?
Agreed. Yeah. and I'm always.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I through college I worked in Guinness, Barry, and I gave tours at the Guinness storehouse. And to your point there, I never realised how the ties that so many people had to Ireland, and the affinity they have with it, and the love that they have for Ireland. And it's we spend our time talking about Ireland as a country and a destination versus as opposed to talking about the actual liquid in the glass. You know, we spend a lot more time speaking about the country and the pride that we have in Ireland. And tonight we spoke about Irish pubs around the United States, Irish music in every corner of America, and it's just an amazing community to be part of as well, isn't it?
It really is. And these lock-ins, so we started this lock-in idea as a just a chance back around St. Patrick's Day when Irish pubs first got locked down. I thought to myself, we'll throw on an old video here and we'll talk about whiskey, and people turned up, and we've done it every week since, and the audience has grown and grown. And I think I'm smart enough to realize it's not because I'm hosting it or anything other than the fact that there's a community that's building up around here. And in Ireland, we took that for granted. I don't know about you, but that community of people you knew and faces that you knew and people, you knew things about people in ways that was important, that allowed you to help people and they could help you, was the thing that maybe I lost over the years, but this lock-in has brought it back together. So hopefully more people can seek out community. And Ireland is, I don't know, I think I'm rambling a little bit, but I'm a little bit emotional at this stage because I think that I'm just finding that myself amongst fellow soft souls for Ireland. And I think we're all in the same place. We have a love for our country and a love for what we left behind. And I think we're all in one way or another flying a flag over here for the country in the hopes that perhaps we can charter planes and bring hundreds and thousands of people back to spend their money and enjoy the countryside and the people that we all left behind. Paddy, would you do us an honour and would you sing a song from your own part of the country, north of the River Lee, from Fair Hill itself? Would you sing us a song?
Oh, well, I'd be delighted to. And Fair Hill, I'm from Fair Hill, you know that. I'm from Fair Hill. I grew up at the bottom of Fair Hill in Cork City. I went to the North Monastery, taught by the Christian Brothers. And I grew up in Kerry Hall Road off Fair Hill. So this is The Boys of Fair Hill, and of course Jimmy Crowley sang it, but it was actually written by a guy called Sean O'Callaghan. Sean O'Callaghan wrote some amazing songs there back in the 1920s, and this history to The Boys of Fair Hill goes back to the county final when Fair Hill got to the county final in hurling against, I think it was the Bars, and of course the War of Independence broke out, and of course the final never played. And then after the War of Independence, when they got the game back together again to play the final, all the lads on the Fair Hill team were either over here in America on the run, they had been in jail, and basically they had a different team was put together and they lost the match. And of course, Sean put these words to it. And of course, over the years, different verses were added in. So this is The Boys of Fair Hill. Come on, boys, and you'll see lads and lasses full of glee, famous for all, they will make your hearts swing. The boys, they won't harm you, all the girls will charm you. Here's up to on, says the boys of Fair Hill. Come on, boys, and spend the day with our Harrier club so gay. The cry of the hound, they will make your heart thrill. When you hear Connie Doyle say, the armoured car has won the day. Yes, here's up the mall, says the boys of Fair Hill. Come on down to Quinlan's pub, that is where you join our club. Round us in gallons the porters go. First we tap a half tierce and drink a health to dash with the race. That's the stuff to give them, says the boys of Fair Hill. Paddy sells crude beans, barely bursting at the seams. Here's up the mall, says the boys of Fairhill. Christy Ring, he hooked the ball, and we hooked Christy ball and all. Here's up the mall, says the boys of Fairhill. And come on, boys, and spend a day. Ah, with our hurling club so gay, the clash of the ash, it would make your heart thrill. And Christy Ring, the Michael Jordan of hurling, the greatest guy in the universe from East Cork and Clyde. He hooked the ball, and we hooked Christy, ball and all. Here's up them all, says the boys of Fairhill. Dum dum da, pie da diddly dum da, dum da dum dum da, dum bum bum ba. Keep on having the lock-in. We all here to drink our still. Here's up the mall, says the boys of Fairhill. Today,
you're like a young Count John McCormack with that beautiful voice.
Barry, I love the comments, and I know this is probably a small batch of a lot more comments that that you're getting.
Absolutely. The comments, Paddy, are insane. People absolutely loving the voice of an angel. The crack is mighty. I know we're all fueled by whiskey, but there's nothing that can take away from the soul, from the song that's coming out of you, Paddy. The soul of Cork, the soul of Ireland is shining through here tonight. And the American audience is on the edge of their seats, and they're thankful for it. And I'm thankful for it.
Miss you freshen.
It's nice to gather around and have the bit of crack, you know.
When I first started the lock-in, I said we'll go for an hour, and then it turned into an hour and 10, and then it became an hour and a half, and then more recently it's been 2 hours. We're now 2 hours, 41 minutes, and 35 seconds into a lock-in. We've said a lot, we've sang a lot, we've drank a lot. We have a great audience still here, but I want to be conscious and respectful of your own times and your own calendars and things you have to do tonight. I'm going to keep sipping on my single pot still. You're all welcome to keep sipping yourselves, but you're also equally welcome to sign out for the night, having delivered an incredible performance, the two of you, in creating an amazing lock-in tonight.
We've only another 12 hours to go.
I'm going. I have nowhere to go, Barry.
I have nowhere to go. Will we keep going, will we?
Oh, yeah, why not?
I have a question. Have we made a record here? 2 hours and 44 minutes.
I think the record was 2 hours and 33 minutes. So we've broken the record.
Lovely.
We've broken the record.
Oldest distillery on the island of Ireland, the longest lock-in.
Why don't we put it to the audience? Should we keep going or should we sign off? If you want us to keep going, I have one ask from you. I want you to hit the like button. I want you to hit the share button. I want you to comment, because it's only no different than a man on the stage. He relies on the feedback from the audience, and that's what we need. And we need more people to know what we're doing. So if you want us to keep going and talking absolute blarney, which, let's be honest, is what we're doing at this stage of the night, but we're having the crack. And I will be honest, I've not enjoyed myself more in a long, long time, having three Irish lads together with a few whiskeys and a few songs. If you want us to keep going, let us know. If you want to go home and go to bed, you can do that too. Our Irish audience, if you're still sticking around, it's almost 3 o'clock in the morning and you're lunatics for staying on this late. Our American audience, especially those on the West Coast, let me ask you this. What else have you got going on? because here is the hottest ticket in town tonight, the Lock-in Livestream with Kilbegan Distillery.
Very good. Fair play, Kathleen.
Go for it. Having the crack. Great night, lads. Keep her lit. Simon says, thankful to Barry, Paddy, and dear friend and compatriot, Michael Egan. Good on you, lads. Barry throwing out the old, you don't have to go home, but you can stay here. Let's make it an even 3 hours. I don't know about you, lads, but this little session here, this little session we've got going here, to me is the making of something bigger. It's the making of a bridge between Ireland and America. And I think we're onto something here between the music, the whiskey, and the bit of Blarney.
Your audio's gone, Paddy, I think.
Your audio's gone. Paddy's audio's shot. It's given up on him.
Is that better? Can you hear me?
No, you'll have to change your speakers or your Wi-Fi or something.
Okay.
Right, we'll get Paddy to figure. I'll put Paddy in the back room there while he figures that out. And Maureen says an old session. Maureen knows it well. Maureen up in Canada, a great friend of Irish whiskey, a great friend of Stories and Sips. Michael, have you no home to go to?
Me? Sitting in it. Barry, I have a question for you while Paddy's getting his audio sorted. In terms of the Irish whiskey industry, and you've interviewed, and I have so much respect for the work that you've done and the interviews that you've conducted, both on podcast and Lock-in Livestream and stuff. What distillery are you looking out for, or what are you most excited about for the future of Irish whiskey?
It's a tough one. I'm emotionally connected by proximity and family connection, in the sense of I grew up in Cove, 12 miles from Middleton. And when I was young, my dad would bring me around the old Middleton distillery, and we'd walk around there, and I have memories of the stone walls and just walking around with my dad, and it'll always be very special to me. So Middleton will always have a special place in my heart, and always will. And I'm conscious that the Middleton distillery since 1975 has laid the way for other exciting new distilleries and brands to come along. And I'm excited for those brands and businesses and distilleries that are true to who they are, that put a stake in the ground and say unapologetically, here's what we're doing and here's why we're doing it. And you can take us or leave us, but we're doing it. Yeah. And that to me is like when I'm not hawking whiskey or talking about whiskey or interviewing people, my day job is working with businesses and brands to help them figure out that exact thing, which is what do you stand for? Yeah. Like, what is it that stake in the ground? And to me, the brands that stand out are the likes of Waterford Distillery, Blackwater Distillery, Dingle Distillery, they're small, they're doing something different. They're a fraction of the percentage of volume that any of the big distilleries will be, but there's something beautiful about, to me anyway, and this is again a personal opinion, there's something to me that's very attractive of, I believe a thing, if you also believe the thing, we'll probably have a good time together. If we don't believe it, this probably isn't for you. I love that black or whiteness of the newer distilleries, and I'd like to see more of that, to be honest. And I think that standing on the shoulders of giants like Jameson and Bushmills and Paddy and Tullamore Dew and those that have paved the way, and Kilbegan, of course, and Tyrconnell and those brands that were massive in the 1800s and early 1900s. Now we have a chance to stand on those shoulders and say, and also this, like there's other things, and also cask finishing, and also terroir, and also A, B, or C. That to me is very exciting.
Agreed. Yeah, and seeing the Leroy as or the balls it takes, really, I have to say, to go out and be unapologetically confident in what you want to do is difficult, regardless of the industry, or regardless of what you're into. But to have I love reading and listening to podcasts and reading up on newer distilleries and brands that have launched, and people that are not really focused on, I'm going to build this and sell it and hopefully get bought out by a bigger company. This is my passion and this is what I love to do. And I'm going to go to somewhere in Ireland. It might be in the middle of nowhere, but we're just going to do it. And that's what I mean, that's what I'm excited about, because that's going to just spur on more people. And I suppose competition spurs on innovation, and the category is only in its infancy now, I think.
Well, look at Kilbegan. In the 1700s, they took a chance. Many families and owners took chances in the generations since. And it's no different today. Than we're looking at predominantly family-owned, independent, small distilleries that quite honestly can't get loans from the bank because whiskey is too precarious an investment. And so banks will turn away from it. And so these distilleries are relying on crowdfunding and friends and family to say, we too believe in the thing you stand for and what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I've long stories and sips is built on not the liquid in a glass, but the people, the places, and the passion behind Irish whiskey. And I would argue that that is the connection, the glue that connects us to the liquid in the glass. And without that, how do we ever stand out on a shelf? And how do we ever punch above our weight? We're a small country with small volume, but boy, can we make a connection better than anybody else, I think.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, well put.
Let me bring Paddy back in here. Paddy, would you have been familiar with Irish whiskey in Ireland growing up, or would that have been, like, for me, it was an old man's drink, Irish whiskey. It wasn't something that I, as a young gossour, ever tried. I was 28, 19 or 20 before I touched a drop of whiskey, but would there have been whiskies in your life growing up?
Oh, yeah. Why'd you name? I was named Paddy. No, there was. I suppose Powers, Paddy. It's funny. I knew. Yeah, I was very familiar with it, and yeah, I suppose I would have drank Paddy whiskey and John Powers over here, and then coming out here to Chicago, I got familiar with other brands, including particularly the Kilbegan brand, and yeah, it's great to see Ireland so well represented. And you are absolutely right how we do kick above our weight, so yeah.
I interviewed Kieran Folliard, the founder of Two Gingers Whiskey, and of course associated with Kilbegan and the Cooley brands, and a remarkable Irishman from County Mayo who has built an Irish whiskey empire and pub empire in Minneapolis. And I was curious about what his thoughts were on the American perception of Ireland and what is brand Ireland to people. And as he shared, and as I've experienced, Ireland is the people. And Ireland is, no matter who has gone to Ireland, they've come back and said, well, aren't the people so friendly? They treated us so well. They took care of us. We have these amazing products, be it Guinness or Kerrygold or Kilbegan or Jameson or anything that's been shipped around the world. What makes, in your opinion, Paddy, the Irish people so unique?
Well, I suppose there'd be two distinctions. One, those that are from Cork, and then those that are not from Cork. I'm just kidding. I didn't have to phone a friend for that, I know, but I suppose, just for myself, growing up in a parish in Cork, people look out for each other. There, we have I think having knowing our history and where we come from, and knowing what we've been through, I think there's an innate empathy within the Irish people to want to help others, and you look at not just in whether it's the whiskey we kick above our weight. Look at the charity charitable component of Ireland. The biggest export to Nigeria was from Ireland was the seminary and whiskey. You may not know that. and it just tells so much about the Irish impact in the world. You know, you have how the Irish saved Western civilization. You know, Tom Cahill book, and you look over the centuries. I think that the Irish people, they understand struggle, they know their history, but the modern type of Irish person coming out, you know, their great education. I'm so grateful to my education in Ireland, but wanting to give back, you know, and I think that's, you know, all other cultures have it in similar sense, but I think for me, it's that sense of Irish hospitality. Again, that the hand is out to help others, and that's my one thing. You add in Irish history on top of that, and you know, you said it earlier, Barry, about, you know, you're missing Ireland, and yeah, absolutely, we miss Ireland a lot. But it inspires us right down to the blade of grass or the ditch that we jumped over in Cork, or you know, the pint of Murphy's that was poured for us, or the, you know, you just know, you know, when you connect with an Irish person like yourselves here tonight, there's almost like, it's almost like a, you know, there's the whiskey settling on the pint of Guinness that's settling down. You're there, you know, and I think, you know, wherever we go or whatever we do, we want to be there with others, you know, and we want to walk that road with them. And wasn't that the message of St. Patrick, you know, the 3 in 1, you know, St. Patrick talked about, I rise today through a mighty strength, the light of sun, radiance of moon, splendor of fire, speed of lightning, stability of earth, firmness of rock. And I think it's that firmness of rock, that ability to be in the present moment, the sacrament of the present moment, that I always kind of look at it. I think that's the uniqueness of Ireland, actually, when you think about it. And whether it's having to drop a whiskey or just here now to taste it, listening to Michael earlier, or whether it's within a song, when you're just being present to the story that's being told. I think that's the uniqueness of Ireland. And I do think, you know, we need to be very cognizant of it. You know, we all lead busy lives, but it's nice just to step back and pause, kind of examine who we are, you know, and don't lose the run of ourselves, and, you know, move forward, you know.
At what point, Paddy, do you think you lose the Irish accent? Suddenly you're a Chicagoan.
Say that again?
At what point do you think you lose the Irish accent and you become more of a Chicagoan than an Irishman?
Oh, never, never, never. That'd be the greatest mortal sin in the planet, particularly a Cork accent, for God's sake, you know.
Isn't there something beautifully reassuring about a Cork accent? Like, I've always thought that if I was to be in a natural disaster or some kind of predicament, so long as I could hear that gentle lilt of a Cork accent, I'd know I was in safe hands.
Oh, total quality. We're looking to bottle it now at the moment, you know.
When we do a song, will we?
Of course.
We stop this conversation.
Right.
But I just want to, if you don't mind, I'd like maybe just to share this particular song, and this may be a slower song, but, you know, I just want to be very conscious of, you know, where everyone is in the world. It's amazing when I call my own mother in Ireland, you know, we're all going through the same thing, and yet there's the beauty and the tragedy of everything that's going on in the world, but there's the humanity as well of everyone coming together. So maybe I might sing this song, and again, we just, you know, we think about everyone that's going through so much, but we also celebrate the connectedness of everyone here. Of all the money e'er I had, I spent it in good company, and all the harm I've ever done, alas, it was to none but me. And all that I've done for want of wit, To memory now I can't recall, and so fill to me the parting glass. Good night and joy be to you all. Of all the comrades that e'er I have, they are sorry for my going away, and all the sweethearts that e'er I have, they'd wish me one more day to stay. But since it fell into my lot that I should rise and you should not, and I gently rise and softly call, good night and joy be to you all. So fill to me the parting glass, and drink a health whatever befall. Then gently rise and softly call, good night and joy be to you all. Of all the comrades that e'er I had, they're sorry for my going away, and all the sweethearts that e'er I had, they'd wish me one more day to stay. But since it fell into my lot that I should rise and you should not, I gently rise and softly call, good night and joy be to you all. So farewell to me the parting glass, and drink a health whatever befall. Then gently rise and softly call, good night and joy be to you all.
Cheers, Paddy. Very good.
We can't top that. A fitting end to 3 hours.
Very good.
Of the greatest session we've ever had. Paddy, Michael, you've entertained
Thank you,
us.
Michael. Thank you, Barry.
You've made me tear up. I wasn't banking on that. And you've created a fantastic meeting place tonight for those who are Irish and those who want to be Irish. And I think we can't do better than that. And I think we should have a toast to those who are still here joining us, sipping with us, to those who wish they were back in Ireland, and for those who will go there at some point, those who are Irish and want to be Irish. We'll raise a glass to you all. Paddy, Michael, thanks a million for a fantastic night tonight. We dove deep into Kilbegan, to songs, to sips, to stories, and all I can say is we'll have to do it again. Slán.
Absolutely. Slán.
Paddy, Sláinte, guys. Paddy, thank you so much for joining us. And Barry, thanks for having us on.
Thank you, Barry, very much. It's an honour. All the best, Mike. And good luck, everyone.
Cheers, Paddy. And Barry, thanks for everything you're doing for the industry, and it's amazing.
We had a great night, and I don't know how we're going to top this, but we have to figure out a way. And I'll say this before we go: there's something unique and special about this combination of whiskey and community and song and story. And maybe together we can find out a way to continue to fly that flag in a way that brings more people together and ultimately brings people to Ireland, because we've got something special here. So thank you, gentlemen, for highlighting it and bringing it out. So Sláinte.
Sláinte, guys.
Take care. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.